Hello and welcome to the BCE Comics Pod. This is your weekly podcast where we read, rate, and review big collected edition comics. I'm your host, Nick Smith, and I'm joined by...
Stoger from Stoger Shelf. How's it going, Nick?
I'm doing good. I mean, we record these things in advance. Just had the Heroes Con last weekend, and that was an absolute blast. So I'm feeling invigorated for comics coming back from that. Although this is going to come out like a month later, I think, maybe even a bit more than a month, but still, good time. How about you? How are things?
Things are good. Summer's in full force now. Kids are out of school, so everybody's adjusting to the new norms. I have a pool in the backyard that I had all nice and clean on Saturday, and by Monday it was completely green with some algae bloom. So I feel a little bit
Fun.
like our president. You do something nice for the, down in DC, and now everybody's mad at you because there's algae in the pool. So.
I was gonna say it's got to be a DC analogy coming on here. Of course, that'll probably be old news by the time we get to July, right?
Yes, yes.
When this comes out. Anyway, this is a special edition of our show. You can see I've got deluxe edition hidden behind me here, although my fat head hides the deluxe. We have decided to launch a Patreon, and this episode is going to kick off the type of shows that you're going to find exclusively on that Patreon account. The idea here is that we're going to reserve reading modern era collections for the Patreon show with the goal of releasing one of these a month. Now, that's easy for Marvel stuff because they label it the Marvel Modern Era Epic Collection and so forth. I guess for DC or anything else, we maybe will just delineate it past the year 2000. Does that sound good to you, Stoger?
Yeah, I mean, we have two options. One is there are some DC Finest's sized books that are not yet in the DC Finest branding, right? But there is a distinct cutoff for the DC Finest, which is the new 52. So technically, if we got
Yeah.
anything, I mean,
Okay.
there's not a branding for it post that, but if we decided, hey, let's do the GLA or Batman by Tom King or something like that, those are big 500-600 thick page trades, but they just don't have any branding for it yet because they don't have a modern version of that on the DC side.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds great. Now, let me also explain a little bit of our reasoning here. We know we're small, right? This is not a big channel by any means. Stozier and I are not expecting this to replace our day jobs or anything like that. But there's some cool things that we want to try that requires funds. And with the enshittification of the internet, it means a lot of these things have monthly subscriptions. Stozier, I think you're already dropping money out for your camera program. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's camera and things like that. And just to correct some things that you're saying there. One, I've never been called small in my life, and two, I am like fully on board with like talking about comic books all day and quitting my job if there's enough subscribers. So just to be clear here. So.
Oh, I mean, that would be a dream, but I'm not expecting it.
Well, a boy can hope. A boy can dream.
Sure, absolutely. So we just, there's only so much that we can throw into this. We're already throwing in a bunch of time and so forth, and we both have families and everything. And we're already investing in this. And, if you guys like what we do, well, we would appreciate some support so we can keep doing things and start doing some more things as well. Anything you would like to contribute, we would greatly appreciate, obviously. If you go to patreon.com/BCE Comics Pod, you can sign up for a $5 a month tier. That's the only thing that we have right now. What we plan to do here is to give you free access to, advanced access to our shows, because, again, we're recording them in advance now. So as soon as we're done, we're going to post those up there, and you'll get them in advance. Plus these exclusive Modern Era episodes, which we will only post on Patreon. We might even put these episodes as separate purchases. I don't know. We'll talk that out. But yeah, go to patreon.com/BCE Comics Pod. Go ahead and sign up, and we would greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. As for this episode, the volume we are going to read and discuss here is Amazing Spider-Man Brand New Day Complete Collection Volume 1. Stozier, I do not have a physical copy of this, but do you have one handy there?
I do. I was lucky enough to get this set off of Well, I bought a couple of them. I have copies of the one. I think I had volumes 1 and 2 that I got somewhere, eBay, wherever. And then somebody in like California was selling the whole set, so I ended up double purchasing 2 of the books. But I got all of the Brand New Day complete collection. They're just as thick as the epics. When the epics get there, I would imagine that unless there's some mapping changes, that they're just going to straight up reskin these.
Yeah, I mean it is a healthy collection. I have my physical copy of floppies here, so you know, you throw those together. It's a pretty thick book, but of course I've got backing boards and it has all the advertisements and stuff in it. So yeah, I definitely fits the epic size of a volume. And of course, we're no fools. We're putting this out because there's a new Spider-Man movie coming out called Brand New Day.
Corporate
Right?
synergy, man. Corporate synergy.
Yeah. Although Stoger, I admit you know how I'm not much of a movie person. I have no idea what the Brand New Day Spider-Man movie is about. I have no clue.
I mean, the I don't know that many other people know what it's about either, because it is sort of like a new kickoff. So the trailers have revealed that Punisher's in it. Bruce Banner is going to be teaching at his school, so the Hulk will obviously be in it at some point in time. There's some visibility of the Hand. There's the trailer has shown what'll probably be a montage of him, fighting supervillains. So there's been people in there like Tarantula and Scorpion shown in there. And the basic plot is in the last movie, was this storyline was one moment in time, or one more day rather, with the world forgetting that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. In
Yeah.
fact, to the extent that the world forgot who Peter Parker was. So he's off on his own and is completely by himself. No Ned, no MJ, no Aunt May, because she died in the last.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, this volume consists of the Spider-Man Free Comic Book Day from 2007, which kind of kicks off this era of Spider-Man. It also has Amazing Spider-Man issues 546 to 564, and the Spider-Man Swing Shift Director's Cut, which basically makes up the bonus material. I have never picked up a Free Comic Book Day comic before. I honestly kind of avoid the comic book store then because it becomes a mess. But I got the Director's Cut, so that's that.
Yeah,
Um,
I've guilted my comic shop over the years, because I'm mail order. I don't go in there anyway, to put them aside for me. So and then as my kids got older, we happened to be out on Free Comic Book Day for like, there just always happens to be some random family event or something where we're driving around. So I make them stop at a comic store, like let them grab something. So I've been pretty lucky with being able to get them, and not I think I've only had to get like one over the last 10 years or so on eBay. And it's but I usually only get like, I make sure I get the Spider-Man ones because I'm a Spider-Man so.
right. I'm I'm an Amazing Spider-Man completionist, but even then, the free comic book day stuff, unless it's part of the regular numbered thing, I'm not worrying about it. You know what? It just occurred to me, and this is not going to matter at all to when this actually comes out, but the day that we're recording this I don't know what they're calling it, but it's 616 Day. It's June 16th, right?
Mhm.
So it's Marvel Day. It's another one of those things at comic book stores. It's a gimmick day to sell stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so of all of the eras of Spider-Man that we could read, I think this is the one that needs the most context to understand what is going on here, because this is heavily determined by some editorial interference. To back things up a little bit, Marvel had developed a distaste for Peter Parker being married to Mary Jane. We cover that marriage when we did Spider-Man Epic Collection 17. That's in there. There was a lot of people in Marvel who felt that the marriage was rushed and that it was just a gimmick and that it limited the types of stories that they could tell with Spider-Man. Um,
I disagree, but I feel like
I
I
was going
needed
to say,
there was an opening there for me to jump in. I wasn't sure if you were continuing
I,
with the backstory, but yes,
no, I was leaving it open for you.
I disagree with editorial vehemently. What I will say though is So here are my overall thoughts about this issue. I disagree, but I am not the necessarily the audience that they're going after. The audience that they're going after are new readers, and I completely understand that. I'm more pissed off that they just got rid of the baby and never said anything about it again at the end of the Clone Saga. So there was a baby and it just disappeared. So they sort of say that they make it seem like she had a miscarriage, or that the baby was born stillborn, but then they kind of have this like sort of fake out where Norman's lackey steals the baby but then doesn't, and then they just kind of drop it and never talk about it again. So that
Yeah.
bothers me more than the marriage. So here's my problem with this. I am okay with this, but stop teasing that he's going to get back with Mary Jane. Right? Just stop playing around with it. Like, because then it's not fun anymore if you're just going to constantly like, will they, won't they? Right? Like the sort of, once Ross and Rachel got together and they broke up on Friends, stop trying to like make them flirt with each other again. Either put them together or don't, and make them move on. So what I like about Brand New Day is that they don't really tease it that much, and we'll get into that in this volume, but they don't really tease it throughout all of the volumes. Where I get a little annoyed is that they started to tease that they were going to get back together fully and even get engaged in Nick Spencer's run. And then Zeb Wells comes along, which I don't even blame Zeb for. I think it was editorial. Zeb Wells comes along in volume 7, and we're introduced to Paul and all this nonsense. So like it's the teasing and the back and forth. Either do it or don't at this point. And that's what bothers me. So
Yeah.
that's going to be my little
And
rant.
sure, and the thing is this has been going on for decades. The editorial dislike of the marriage between Spider-Man and Mary Jane, and then some writers trying to come in and, I think there's generally a fan desire for that to happen. I mean, after all, name a Spider-Man movie, with the exception of the Amazing Spider-Mans where they had Gwen Stacy in it, but otherwise, name a Spider-Man movie that doesn't have an MJ, right? Be it actual Mary Jane or whatever. God, what's her name? Zendaya, whatever it is. I'm not a movie person, you know that.
Yeah, so Zendaya is technically MJ, I guess, but wasn't, but is. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
at the end of the day, that's who he's with, and her initials are MJ, so I guess that works. They actually did a good job with like that, with like getting everybody comfortable with it without like, I don't, everybody freaking out about like racial things and stuff like that. Like, I love those movies, so I have no problem with her being MJ, but I think in the first movie they were like, no, she's not really MJ. Her name's not Mary Jane or whatever they were saying at the time, right? Like they introduced it differently. So
it if that wasn't the intention, why is her initials MJ? I mean, come on,
well, no, I think it always
we all
was the
know.
intention, but it was like an
Yeah.
out so that they didn't have to deal with the stupid internet bros that were gonna like freak out about every casting call. So I mean, I don't know if that they were really playing fourth dimensional chess there, but they had an out if they wanted to take it as so.
Yeah. So, to the comics and to the context here, Marvel editorial had long had a problem with that marriage. They thought a married Spider-Man made him older, and there was a line of thought that Spider-Man is supposed to be about the youth. After all, Leon Ditko created him as a teenage superhero. Having them divorce was out of the question because being both married and divorced aged him even further. So editorial didn't like that. And so there had been a lot of attempts to eliminate Spider-Man's marriage to Mary Jane, right? The Clone Saga was one. What if the Peter Parker who married Mary Jane was actually the clone from the 70s and not the real Peter Parker? We could just switch them out and thus be done with MJ. But of course, we all know that storyline pissed off a lot of readers, myself included, and audiences clamored to have Spider-Man back. The next attempt to get rid of this marriage happened during John Byrne's run, where they actually had Mary Jane die in a plane crash or a plane explosion or something like that. Again, that's fuzzy in my head. That too caused problems because then you have a mopey Spider-Man trying to get over his grief, which was not like the character that people had grown to love, who's, quipping, making jokes all the time and so forth. And Mary Jane was a popular character. People wanted her back. I mean, I am not fully up to date with most of the modern stuff, but Mary Jane technically has her own title unless she's been taken off of it. Is that correct, Stozier? I'm
Uh,
trying not to give away who she is in case people don't know.
well, I mean, there's yeah. So yes, she has her own title. It's hard to say that not give away who she is by not saying the title, but yes.
People
Uh,
probably, yeah, people probably know by now, but just in case, because I was going to mention that you had accidentally spoiled a storyline to me earlier today via our text messages, but I was like kind of right at that point anyway,
yeah,
so it
yeah.
doesn't really matter. So anyway, Mary Jane's a popular character. So Howard Mackey brought her back in the last issue of his run, and right before J. Michael Straczynski began his run on Amazing Spider-Man in Volume 2, Issue 30, something like that. That's the time when Marvel denotes the start of the modern era, at least according to this epic mapping. All right, so during Straczynski's run, we have several big events occur, one of which is Civil War. During Civil War, Spider Man reveals his secret identity to the public, which makes him and his loved ones vulnerable to attacks by his enemies, just as he feared would be the case throughout his history of being a superhero. And so, because of this, Aunt May was targeted by the Kingpin, and she was shot and left to die. That sets us up for, I'm going to say without a doubt, the most controversial storyline in Spider Man's history. And what you alluded to, Stoger, this is One More Day. All right, in this storyline, in order to save Aunt May's life, Spider Man makes a deal with Mephisto to give up his marriage to Mary Jane. And this would have the consequences of changing just one moment in time to prevent the marriage, but to have Spider Man and Mary Jane still stay together as a couple. And so that means all the stories that we read in the past before this change are still valid, they still happened, the marriage just went away. This would also restore Spider Man's secret identity. All right, kind of what you alluded to, Stoger, with what's happening in the movie. Everyone forgets who Spider Man is. All right, nobody knows, it's not public anymore. But there'd be a few other ramifications not mentioned. Straczynski had actually pitched bringing back both Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy. That the original plan for the story was actually going to take it back even further than just the marriage, but that was ultimately rejected by Marvel's editor-in-chief of Joe Quesada because that was going to cause too many problems. And really, it's Joe Quesada who pushed for this story. And his interference got to the point where Straczynski actually requested his name be taken off the last two issues of the One More Day storyline. Ultimately, that didn't happen because Straczynski didn't want to further harm the brand, but he was pissed off enough about this, the direction it was going, that he said it wasn't really his story anymore. And I'm going to add my 2 cents to all of this. I'm not opposed to Spider-Man's marriage having gone away. The way they did it was terrible, in my opinion, though. You have Marvel's flagship superhero making a deal with the devil, essentially. And with this big reset, at least for me, the Spider-Man stories have not really felt real or true to the character since then. The whole thing Marvel has been built on is this continuity, that they live in the real world when these characters interact with one another. But this reset felt like that real world, that continuity just kind of went away. And Marvel Editorial was fairly certain that this story would be forgotten about in just 5 years, but we're nearly 20 years away from when that happened. And it's something that still angers me, and I think it still angers a lot of other Spider-Man readers, long-running Spider-Man readers, maybe not new ones, but those of us who have been around for a long time. And it's kind of left a stain on the book that few writers have been able to really overcome, at least in my opinion. So,
I'm not as hard on
yeah,
it as that, to be honest with you. You know, I don't like I don't like that they did it. I don't think that they needed to do it, but I understand their reason. I actually think that's putting aside the first half of JMS's that everything post Brand New Day or everything post One More Day, the Brand New Day era, all the way through the Nick Spencer run at least. Maybe starting to trail off at the Nick Spencer run has been really good to really has been top tier to average Spider-Man, let's say, right? Like to me, like the only thing that dips down into bad is maybe like you can argue about the Zeb Wells run. as it dipped into bad. But when you compare the 90s, the Clone Saga, the the even the 80s to a certain extent, right? Like you get Stern's run, which I think is really good. But like I've been trying to read those classic epics like right before Stern's run. Boring. Like to be honest with you. Like I love Spider-Man. It's my favorite character. The things that are around the around the alien costume saga. I know we're all longing for like the gang war storyline in the volume 16 and stuff like that, but I've flipped through some of those issues on Marvel Unlimited, and they're not great post Stern before you get into the Michelini era. And so I think like the 90s were really good with Michelini and Bagley and Michelini and all the Venom stuff and things like that. But the Clone Saga drug on for a while. The post Clone Saga wasn't great. The Howard Mackie run, which by the way, Mackie and Byrne wrote that whole era. It wasn't John killed her in the
Right.
plane
Yeah.
crash. They were joint writers, if not. I was looking it up when you were talking because I was pretty sure that Mackie was writing from issue 1 was. But like that was all bad. And even as much as I love the JMS run, the second half of the JMS run is not great. Like the Back in Black stuff's good, but like you get things like the you know what did we just Sins Past, which is terrible. It's one of the worst
That
stories.
one is admittedly
Yeah.
terrible.
But then
But
there's
I
just
feel
some
like a lot of
boring stuff in there too. Like some of the new Avengers stuff, as it's in Amazing Spider-Man, isn't as good as Spider-Man is in New Avengers, like in the other book. So I don't know. I really look. I know we'll get into like the Dan Slott issues. I actually love Dan Slott's run. I think some of it's average, but some of it's like top 5 Spider-Man writer storylines ever. Things like that. I love the Superior Spider-Man stuff. So to me, I think Brand New Day did what it was intended to do, which was reinvigorate Spider-Man, put top tier artists, top tier top writers on this, and it's only until recently as it started to falter.
And we will have discussions about all this, I'm sure. One thing I might want to add, and this is another important piece of context to Brand New Day, is that before Brand New Day, there had been 3 and sometimes even more different Spider-Man titles. And so, quasi to your point, Stoger, that when Amazing Spider-Man was not doing great, well, you just go read Spectacular Spider-Man. There are times when Amazing wasn't all that great, but the good stories were in Spectacular Spider-Man. So, you had options. But before Brand New Day, there had been 3 ongoing Spider-Man titles that still survived. There was Amazing Spider-Man, of course, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and then Spectacular Spider-Man. Naturally, Amazing Spider-Man outsold all the others because that was the original Spider-Man book, and you have people like me who just buy Amazing Spider-Man because they are building a collection. Um, well, in a world where digital streaming services were just beginning and people were binge watching television, keeping an audience's attention for a story that only came out once a month was getting harder for Marvel to do. But you couldn't keep the same writer artist combo putting out a book once a week, not like a television show. The art takes more time than that, hence why they had 3 separate Spider Man titles. But they all had different storylines, and so that wasn't satisfying either, right? Because, again, you're jumping around to different titles. So Marvel took this opportunity to experiment with Amazing Spider-Man for a new type of comic storytelling. They would have a rotating series of creators, the writers, whom they called the Brain Trust, who would create a 3-issue story arc in advance, release those, and then after a couple of months, that same team would come out with another arc. All right, so you rotate through these 4 different writers essentially who make up the Brain Trust. And I think initially the idea was to have them paired up with the same artist, but it seems like maybe that didn't quite happen.
Yeah.
So that means 3 issues of Amazing Spider-Man were coming out once a month, and we would have some consistency for 3 issues, and then Marvel could keep up with production. All right. Thoughts on that, Soldier, the Brain Trust?
Sorry, I thought you were continuing going. We're out of sync slightly. Not technically, just mentally. The our so far our technical issues are non-existent, knock on wood. So the I think the Brain Trust is a great idea. I look, I at this point we only had we had 2 consistent Spider-Man titles The Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man was rebranded 2 or 3 times. So it started off as like I think it started off technically as Marvel Knights Spider-Man, and then it was Sensational Spider-Man. Or maybe that ended, and then Friendly Neighborhood kicked off with the others at the time of the other storyline. Which again, the other storyline is dog crap. Like that's a horrible storyline. And so another thing that happened at the second half of JMS's run. Um, so yeah, I think that's what it was. So at the time that the other kicked off, which was the second half of JMS's run, right before Civil War, like the other ends and then Civil War starts. That's when Friendly Neighborhood started. So we didn't have 4 titles for that long. We had 3 titles with all of the changes that I was talking about earlier. Um, but they weren't as popular, but your point was still valid that if you didn't like one thing you could go jump to the other. But starting with that like sort of Howard Mackie like reboot, they were pretty well intertwined, so there wasn't like it wasn't like it was in the 90s, I guess is my point, or the 80s, where like they were literally like, hey, they'd have crossovers like so pre-Clone Saga, right? They'd have occasional crossovers, but yeah, you went to Web of Spider-Man for more of like the people in Spider-Man's life, maybe Spectacular had more of like the Harry, the Liz, or the back in the day it was more the mafia angles and things like that. And then Amazing Spider-Man was your super heroics, like your big super villain that. Um, but then you get into the Clone Saga in the 90s with constant crossovers. They never really got back to that. They maybe a little bit with Spectacular and Spider-Man, but they only had 2 titles, I think, post Clones, maybe 3. But anyway, so they there was so much like stopping and starting of those titles during that time period. It's so hard to keep straight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the idea of the brain trust because it was consistency, right? It was top artists. If you don't like the writers like or the stories, we can talk about that. But there was no scrubs when it came to the artists. And if you didn't like the artist, you had another one coming in 3 issues. And for me, I like consistency with my art and my storylines, right? So what I liked is that you didn't get some random fill-in artist in the middle of a story arc. This was the artist for that story arc for whatever arc you were on. And a side note, the other thing that I find acceptable or kind of like is when they put 2 artists on one storyline and somebody's doing like the flashbacks and somebody's doing the present day or something like that. I don't mind that either, but it's the consistency aspect for me. So.
Yeah, I'll just add in that when it comes to the multiple titles and so forth, when it came to the '90s, yes, I think it was the Spider-Man editor or local editor Jim Salicrup who began the constant crossover because he wanted basically what we got during Brand New Day of it to be one consistent story throughout all the titles.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to JMS's run on Amazing, you did have Peter Parker Spider-Man as something that was quasi separate and they didn't often intertwine. But we enter that phase, which I guess I'll blame oh shoot, Brian Michael Bendis for this, where there's constant big events and constant crossovers. And I feel like that's really what disrupts a lot of JMS's run. And then, like, I'm thinking of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I think that was one that was meant to be Peter David's book, but he constantly had to deal with all these other crossovers and so forth that, the fallout of Civil War and all that stuff, that it just never really took off like we hoped it would. So anyway, I think that's plenty of context, unless I forgot something, Stozier.
No, I think we should get into it. We probably I could sit here and wax poetic on this for hours. So.
Yep. All right. So we're going to get into the individual stories, but it's different from what we do with our regular show. With modern books, since these are written with the trade paperback in mind, and I think that's another thing we can either thank or hate Bendis for, we're going to clump these together in storylines instead of individual issues. And frankly, because of how the Brain Trust works, that works really well. We've got 3-issue chunks. For the most part, there's the occasional thing that that's a little
there's
bit
some
separate.
one-offs sprinkled in, but yeah.
Yeah. So we're actually, even before this trade paperback, there's one little bit from the final issue of One More Day. Amazing Spider-Man number 545. This is One More Day, part 4. Not going to do the whole thing, just as soon as Mephisto comes in, undoes the marriage, we get a montage where Spider-Man's life is flashing before his eyes because, in my mind, he's dead now. And then after that, we get Brand New Day.
Yeah,
Okay.
so so I actually have the gallery edition because I got it cheap at like Ollie's for $10 or something like that. But I will say, um, Peter technically never makes the deal with the devil. Mary Jane's the one that whispers to the devil. Peter just sits there like a baby and doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
So
Still.
that's one correction. But yeah, so these are some of the pages. I know some of that's not the some of it's probably coming in through a little blurry, but you know, we get some of this. I don't think we have these issues in the comic viewer, but you know, you
No.
get the a little bit of him, leaving Aunt May's house. You get the surprise. This is where the surprise of Harry being back is. You get a little bit of flashes of some of these new characters. You get sort of MJ, leaving here, and then finally, the naming, the branding, so to speak, of It's a Brand New Day, and then we get to pick up into the new book. Any thoughts on this ending here that you want to talk about?
Um, Honestly, after reading how the marriage was removed, now I'm putting myself in the mindset of when this happened, when I read it as it came out. Having the marriage removed and the timeline essentially reset, it was a punch in the gut. It really was. I was interested to see what they would do, particularly with Harry, because as you said, that was a big surprise. Harry Osborn is there, right? But bringing Harry back also ruins that kind of heart wrenching death that he had in Spectacular Spider-Man 200. So on the one hand, I was like, gosh, I feel terrible for what is it, DeMatteis and Sal Buscema? Is that who was on that?
Yep.
So I feel sad for them that this culmination of their run in a way is just snap the finger, it's gone. But at the same time, well, Harry's back. Is Gwen going to be back? What's going to happen? I didn't know. So I was willing to give it a run, but it hurt.
Yeah,
It still hurts.
I'll be
Honestly.
honest. I made my peace when I was reading this. Like, all right, they're gonna do it, so let's just take our medicine and get through these issues. I love the Cusada art, even though I hate the story. Right, and then
Yeah. Oh yeah, Quesada's great as an artist.
and there's all these teases throughout here about like why Mephisto's really doing it, and he's doing it not because he cares about Peter or MJ or wants to mess with them, but he's doing it because their daughter would have grown up to challenge him at some point in time. And
I don't think we get that at this point, right? That comes a lot later, doesn't
no,
it?
he says it. That's why he kept posing as the little redhead girl throughout
Oh,
the storyline. So like, there's this like little red-haired girl that's like walking around with them and teasing them and stuff like that. And I think he says it, or
I honestly have not read it since it came out.
but the
I've not
Knicks.
been able to
But
pick it up.
if I'm spoiling something, don't worry. This storyline's awful. But they really make it clear. I think in here they don't say. So the part that they probably don't say here is that the girl will grow up to challenge him. What they do say here is that little girl was your daughter, that could have been, or something like that. So he definitely says that somewhere. I'd have to read it to find the page or whatever. But listen, if you're gonna read the Sins Past that was just released, I would recommend buying that Epic Collection because there's a lot of other good stuff in there. If you're gonna read this again, I would just maybe go read Nick Spencer's run, because Nick kind of retcons some of this stuff, or at least puts some of this in context, right? He retcons the Harry stuff, he retcons the Sins Past stuff, and he gives a little bit more context to the Mephisto stuff. So I'm not saying you'll end up liking this, but it'll at least like say like, all right, well, somebody undid it, and this is their logic for undoing some of that, where it goes. For me, I don't like Harry coming back because it kind of makes no sense. Like, it's never explained as to why doing any of this stuff, retconning the marriage, means that he's alive. They don't ever go back and show any sort of actions that he took that changes the Harry's path that would cause him to, be alive right now. So none of that makes any sense. I don't like Harry being here. It felt weird at the time. It still bothers me. I mean, I just suck it up and move on, but I didn't like it.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Should we go ahead and actually get into the meat of this?
Let's do it.
All right, so Amazing Spider-Man Swing Shift, or the Free Comic Book Day from 2007. This is written by Dan Slott, pencils by Phil Jimenez, inks by Andy Lanning with John Dell. The editors at the time are Stephen Wacker, Tom Brevoort as the executive editor, and Joe Quesada as editor-in-chief. I bring that up because editorial is highly involved. Let's talk about our creators here. Firstly, Dan Slott will become after this the longtime writer on Amazing Spider-Man. Not long after this Brand New Day initiative, I think he did beat out Stan Lee for the number of issues he wrote. Is that correct? Like he did like 3 more, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm 99% sure that that's correct. I mean, he's written a lot of Spider-Man. He's choked up. So yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I think I read once that was his goal. He just wanted to beat Stan on length on Spider-Man. Although he I don't want to say he cheated. It wasn't his fault. It was what editorial done. But he's doing 3 a month, where Stan was just doing 1 a month, right? Okay, so
He's
anyway,
back again. He's writing it again. New book's out now.
Right. Yeah, spectacular Spider-Man he's doing, and it's called Brand New Day, is it not?
The first story arc is set during this time, and then if they get enough sales, it'll continue as an ongoing and jump into the present day.
All right. I haven't read it yet, but maybe I will. Anyway, Dan Slott is not new to writing Spider-Man. Slott had written a lot of cartoon adaptations in comics before, most notably the Ren and Stimpy comic. And in Ren and Stimpy, he did have an appearance of Spider-Man. In 2004, he wrote She-Hulk and then wrote a very acclaimed miniseries called Spider-Man Human Torch. This series was so well done and revealed such a love and understanding of the character of Spider-Man that many of us fans clamored for Slott to become the new regular writer of Spider-Man when we heard that J. Michael Straczynski was leaving the book. So I was very much excited to hear that Dan Slott would be writing the book at the time. Anyway, he moved on to write Great Lake Avengers miniseries, which reintroduced Squirrel Girl, and he attempted a revival of the Things series before he was then tapped to join the Brain Trust and to start writing Spider-Man. As I recall, Slott was very enthusiastic because he had a journal where he had been writing ideas for Spider-Man in for years, and so writing Spider-Man was essentially his dream job.
I mean, I'm a big Dan Slott fan, and I think we're going to see a lot of things that, as we go through here, the things that lasted are going to be the stuff that Slott wrote. So, just going to say,
yeah, because he was then on the book for 100 issues.
I mean,
of course he's going to keep his stuff.
The first story arc we're going to talk about, there's a video game with that character.
Yeah, and Dan Slott is the writer on that video game.
Yeah, but okay.
No, I'm not gonna deny he brings in a lot of great ideas. And we'll talk about this, but as his run went on, at least for me, I had some problems. But that's not in this book, right? This is he has 2 runs on this book, right? Okay, so that's Dan Slott. Jimenez, he started DC when he was 21. He was hired by Neil Ponzer, and the 2 of them actually started dating for a while until Ponzer died in 1994 from complications resulting from AIDS. Jimenez, though, did a lot of work for DC, but signed an exclusive deal with Marvel in 2007 so he could join this Brain Trust working on Amazing Spider-Man, although he's one of the artists, not really one of the Brain Trust. Those are really the writers. As for our editors, I bring them up because, again, this is an era where we have a lot of heavier hands with editorial on Spider-Man, such as One More Day itself. Steve Wacker, he started at DC, but was recruited by Marvel in 2006 as the senior editor for the Spider-Man comics, and he would stay in that capacity until 2014. Tom Brevoort started at Marvel in 1989 as a college intern and had slowly been working up the ranks of editorialship. In 2007, he was granted the title of executive editor, and he as we have here, right? He is still with Marvel as executive editor, but also as senior vice president. And he has a very interesting blog that he keeps up with, which is called the Tom Brevoort Experience. I would recommend checking that out to just get the thoughts of a long grain editor in this business. Joe Quesada had begun as an artist working for DC and Valiant Comics, but as Marvel filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1998, they invited Quesada over to launch the Marvel Knights line as editor and to bring in some of its independent contacts with him. And this infusion of new talent with little editorial oversight saw some new and very successful stories develop, which helped Quesada and other creators on the Marvel Knights line earn some notoriety. So when Bob Harris was ousted as editor-in-chief, Joe Quesada stepped in, and we saw some more bold experimentation at Marvel with the launching of the Ultimate line and this new age of large sweeping events like House of M and then Civil War. And in many ways, his tenure as editor-in-chief was a renaissance at Marvel, at least in my opinion, but one that would have some long-lasting repercussions, both good and bad.
Yeah, I think I'm
Okay.
a big fan of all of that stuff. I'll be honest, like I think everything that Quesada did up until the One More Day stuff. I mean, bringing in Brian Michael Bendis, all these big events. People did not care about the Avengers at this point in time. Reinvigorated the Avengers, um reinvigorated the X-Men. Even the X-Men were in a slump prior to this time period, and over time, the X-Men had some really good storylines during this era. Post House of M and everything that happened there. There's that whole Messiah War trilogy, for instance, that went through all of their books over during that time. So um, there's just so much good. I mean, Marvel had really this sort of like early 2000 to like mid 2010s, renaissance, as you put it. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. But like I said, there's some repercussions of this that I had not considered at the time. When you have all the heroes of the Marvel universe fight one another in a civil war, how do you come back from that? We kind of came back from it by just ignoring it, is the impression I've gotten. But doesn't matter. That's not the point for this episode, right?
when we
Um,
so what so remember, you said that when we end up doing one day our Hickman Avengers run, because what I'll say is the end of the Hickman Avengers run, the last scene for Iron Man and Captain America in the Marvel universe is them killing each other. Like canonically, the original 616 Cap and Iron Man fight to the death at the end of the Marvel universe before Secret War. So, it they weren't all buddies after that. So after Civil War. So
yeah, but then what happened after that? I'll admit I don't know because I have a bit of a gap in the up until relatively recently because of just life events. I've
Mhm.
been keeping up with Spider-Man, but not much else really. Um,
And what happened after
anyway,
that? It was Secret Wars, and then everything got kind of reset. So you know,
right, yeah, because that's right. You had a bunch of scrolls coming in. Okay, I remember all that, and that was confusing as heck too, at least in my opinion. But um, we'll ignore it for now.
no, I think
We're doing Spider-Man.
Secret Invasion. I'm talking about Secret Wars, like where Doom World and all that stuff. So
Oh God, that was even worse. Okay, sorry. Yes,
even worse. Oh,
you're
so
right.
yeah, so we gotta. Here's the thing. So going forward, we're gonna have to pick episodes where we're on opposite sides of the issue, because I love Secret Wars, I love Secret Invasion. So I'm a big Dan Slott fan. So I think we're starting to frame out where we're gonna have some conflict on the podcast.
The modern stuff, right?
Yeah.
I don't hate all the modern stuff, but oh God, the Secret Wars, that was the one where Doom imploded all the multiverse. That's how we got Miles in the 616. God, that was terrible. God. Okay, all right, fine. We're not worrying about that now. All right.
All right, moving on.
Moving on, the story for this one, Free Comic Book Day 2007 or Swing Shift, whichever one you wanted. All right, so as Spider-Man is getting Peter Parker, as he's getting a cake for Aunt May's birthday, a new villain called Overdrive tears through New York in his car. Now, even though there are a bunch of registered heroes to fight him off, because this is post Civil War, heroes now have to register if you have superpowers or you're a criminal. Spider Man is not registered. Well, he had, but this flip that happened because the universe reset. Now he
They
hasn't.
erased it or something. Who knows? You know.
Yeah, magic, as you're such a fan of Stoger.
Not a fan of magic. And do they talk about the magic in here, or is that one moment in time? Just
I think I think that's one moment in time because this doesn't it. They later come out and say Doctor Strange put a spell on everyone to make them
yeah.
forget
So
that he
that's
did this.
that has
I think
nothing,
that's later.
right? So that has nothing to do with the marriage, but that's the explaining of how the genie went in the bottle for the
Yeah,
secret identity. Yeah. So
right.
it's not in the one more day, but to your point, it's in the one moment in time, which is extra stuff that happens later. So anyway, continue.
Yeah. Um. All right. So, even though there's a bunch of registered heroes to fight off this guy tearing through New York, Spidey is on the scene, and so he takes out Overdrive with the help of the New York police and a mysterious red-headed hero called Jackpot, who of course calls Spider-Man Tiger, and we all know what that is supposed to mean. Spider Man is able to retrieve May's cake in time for the party, except his webbing doesn't dissolve for another half hour, which means because he webbed up the cake to keep it safe. And since his webbing won't dissolve, that means he's going to miss his aunt's party. I guess I should say this is another change with the reset is in that storyline. The other you mentioned, Stoger, to keep Spider-Man in the comics in line with the new Spider-Man in the movie, he has organic web shooters. Well, now he doesn't anymore. Now they're mechanical, back as it had been at the start. All right, your thoughts, Stoger.
So, I mean, this is a jam-packed either because of the year that it was put out or because it's, the kicking off all of this stuff. Like, we don't get free comic book days that are this big, right? They're 8 pages or something like that now. This is, a very large one. I'm a big fan of the art. I think Jimenez's art, prior to this wasn't always my favorite, but during this time period, I think it's really, really well done. Reminds me a bit of George Perez, with the amount that he's able to squeeze into scenes, facial expressions. In fact, on DC books, he often is paired up with was paired up with George as they did things like in Infinite Crisis and things like that, and sort of had certain issues out. Either I think it was right before this, maybe it was right after this, maybe after he left Spider-Man, he went over back to DC. I forget the exact order of operations there. Um, I like that he doesn't have organic webbing anymore. But I don't like that it's just like magically yada yada over. But then again, I hate the other storyline, so sure, yada yada. I don't like the Jackpot character only because it's a tease. Like I don't mind and I don't mind a little playfulness with it. And they kind of lay out like, it's a little bit tongue in cheek, like that it's not going to be her. But you didn't know this when this one issue came out. So that was a little eye rolling because it's like, oh God, what is this? And but as they progress that character, not to say that I ever enjoy that character or like it, but it's not like they like drag the tease out with her for forever, right? We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next story arc. I like Overdrive in this issue. When we get to the end of the book and we talk about Overdrive in the last storyline, I'm gonna hate Overdrive. And I'll give you a hint as to why. And it starts with the M and it ends with Agic. So his powers make no sense later on in the story. So I think this is a good status quo kind of kick everything off. I mean, we're going to do a little bit more of this in the first issue. I like the idea of like the bar with with no name. So I like that. We're back at the Bugle and seeing some interaction there with different characters. So that's fun. And as much as I like Phil's art, I will say I kind of don't like his Spider-Man. Like I like everything else, but when Spider-Man's in the costume, he looks like a little awkward, or the proportions seem off. It's maybe it's something with the head and the way he draws the head. Um, but it's an odd thing because you would think that like that would be the part that I would that most people would like, right? You know, like you're drawing Spider-Man, like the main character in his costume having fun. But I'm like I kind of don't like his Spider-Man. But all the rest of the art I like. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Um, in terms of this being a Spider-Man story, it hits a lot of the classic beats, right? Spidey's sense of responsibility kicks in since he's on the ground and he can do something. All right, so that's good. Having the police not trust him but still work with him was well done. He shows off both his knowledge of New York City and physics to get the job done, so that too is good. Having to be Spider-Man affects his personal life, so it does really hit again a lot of the major beats of a good Spider-Man story. I'm with you with Jackpot, and we did not know when this came out. This felt like another punch in the gut just after the events of One More Day. Reading this for the first time, this is clearly meant to be Mary Jane as a registered superhero. And, going back to One More Day, Stoger, you mentioned that she's the one who makes the deal with Mephisto. There's that scene where she's whispering something to Mephisto that we could not read. I've never gone back to it with a magnifying glass to see if we could actually get anything out of that. But the big question was, what was it? What did she say to him? And seeing this red-headed hero who is called Jackpot and calls Peter Tiger. I mean, what were we supposed to think? Of course we're going to think this is Mary Jane, right? So to do that, and whether it's intentionally a tease or intentionally a kick in the butt to fans, either way, it did not feel good. So given that we had the return of Harry Osborn back from the dead, we as readers had no clue what kind of outlandish things Marvel might do in this new reality they created. So really not a fan of that. So it starts very promising. It is very promising. Jackpot ruins a lot of that.
Yeah. The other tease that well, actually we'll talk about this the next issue or coming up, not in this one. So never mind. We can keep going.
All right. Well, let's get into the first actual arc then. So we're going to look as a group at Amazing Spider-Man number 546 to 548. These issues are called Brand New Day, Crimes of the Heart, and Blood Ties. This is written by Dan Slott, pencils by Steve McNiven, and inks by Dexter Vines. We've already talked about Dan Slott, right? McNiven got his start at CrossGen. I love CrossGen. I was so excited when Marvel put out those CrossGen Omnis, and I kept hoping that they would do more, but I don't think we're getting any more. Anyway, he penciled the CrossGen fantasy book Meridian. He then moved to Marvel, where he worked on a couple of different books, and he worked with Mark Miller on the Civil War miniseries before moving to Spider-Man. So I think he was the main artist for Civil War, right? So
yeah.
a big thing there for him. All right. In this story arc, Peter Parker is having a time with no job and no prospects. He's trying to find an apartment to rent so he can move out of his Aunt May's house. Except that the Daily Bugle owes him money for printing some of his old pictures of Spider-Man, so Peter decides to go to Jonah in order to collect. Except that Jonah is hard-pressed because the Superhero Registration Act has actually been successful. Crime is down, and thus newspaper circulation is also down. He's facing a buyout from a rival, and he suffers a heart attack when Peter tries to collect his payment. Well, Joe Robertson, editor-in-chief, suggests that Pete goes out to get some news photos to help save the Bugle while Jonah is in the hospital. And this leads to Spider-Man falling into a gang hit as two mob families were coming together. A new villain in town named Mr. Negative managed to concoct a poisonous gas that reacts to the DNA of those who share blood ties with the host who supplied the blood for the gas, and he calls this gas the Devil's Breath. Well, after killing off the mob, Spidey realizes that the mob boss's children may be a target next, and so he goes to save the children at a circus performance in the park. Well, Spider-Man succeeds, but after Mr. Negative holds a child hostage, Spidey is forced to give over some of his blood in order to free the child. All of this, and Spider-Man never gets any photographs in order to sell. All right, Sojer, your thoughts?
I think this is a great story arc to kick everything off, and I'm not just saying that because Dan Slott wrote it. There's some really funny scenes in here. I mean, I'm stopping here with Peter having to give Jonah mouth to mouth after his heart attack, and the revisiting of this, where it happens a couple times, is also pretty funny. Um, I I think Mr. Negative is a great villain. He comes with his own minions that you can argue are just kind of ninja Japanese mafioso type characters, or you can argue that like they're people that he's like infected and sort of transformed and flipped. So I think that's really good. I think the idea and the concept here of having somebody walking around Spider-Man's mask, sort of like mugging people, is a great little foible for him to have to deal with. I think that the supporting characters are pretty strong. Like I'm interested in who Carly Cooper is. Not too interested in Harry's girlfriend. I know we'll get a lot more with that, and she's sort of linked in with the her dad being the mayoral candidate, things of that nature. But the sort of Carly angle is interesting. This whole Dexter Bennett buyout stuff and what's Marla has to do here to make a choice is really strong. I mean, I didn't really ever think that much of Marla. I know she was in the books before, and the Jonah and her got married in one of the annuals back in the early 80s or something like that. But this isn't a character that I thought about. Now I'm interested in her. Like she's standing up to the big bully that's in Spider-Man's life and making this choice for his own health that he's obviously going to hate her for. But will he hate her because he loves her, because they're married? And I think that's a really strong quagmire to put those people in. um I I feel like we overdo it with the teases. So the tease here of like Spider-Man getting exposed to the devil's breath at the end of the issue that I'm quickly flipping through here, and then being okay on the next screen. I remember when I first read this, I was like, what happened? Like, how's he okay? And I really had to like pay attention to like the details here where he's okay and the other guy's okay because they don't have the blood relationship, and it's connected to blood. But so again, all of these like sort of concepts are kind of working for me as I go through this, and as we're through this adventure in Spider-Man's life, until ultimately we get a scene towards the end of this um where Mr. Negative gets one over on Spider-Man and now has this sort of I don't know, poker chip to keep in his pocket against him later, or some sort of like concept that could take Spider-Man down or could at least hurt him in the future, and makes this villain all that more threatening. Oh, and by the way, as we get the instant secret revealed that this is a guy that's working right hand in hand with Aunt May at Feast, which is another great concept because you don't just have Aunt May like, picketing at the university or, collecting stamps or whatever the heck she did throughout all the 90s. She's volunteering at a homeless shelter. Like how smart is that to have one of your characters being a hero in her own right as you go through this. So I love everything about this status quo for Spider-Man. I hate how we got here, don't get me wrong, but I'm on board for all of this stuff. What are your thoughts?
um, I have some similar feelings. As a straight up Spider Man story, this is good, right? Peter's trying to avoid being Spider Man, circumstances force him into it. That's classic Spider Man. That's great. I am fine with this new situation for Aunt May where she's volunteering at the shelter. That works really well for her. That's a great idea. I'm with you there. The new villain, Mr. Sinister, is good. We don't know much about him or his powers at this stage. You're right. Sorry, I must have just been reading an X-Men one while I typed up my notes and I pulled an Anchorman. I'm just reading my notes. So yeah, no, Mr. Negative's great. I don't feel like he gets enough time for us to build to him. And let me explain my thoughts here. I remember when I first read this, I was super offended primarily because it was coming on the heels of One More Day. Part of that offense was because of the dissolution of the marriage was dangled in front of the reader's face several times. Right from the beginning, we're told MJ's out of the picture. And then when Spider-Man wakes up next to the mob boss at the start of the third issue, he says something like, "I'll never wake up next to a pretty face," right? Well, BS, nonsense. He had Mary Jane. He had done that. It dawned on me when I was reading this, though, the reason why this felt so off and so wrong is because there was no continuing thread from before One More Day. If we had a big mob boss like Mr. Negative being introduced, he wouldn't be immediately the villain, right? He would get a page here or there for like 5 issues and slowly be introduced in. So it just feels unearned that he's suddenly this big mob boss that we've never heard before when we had people like the Kingpin, Hammerhead, and so forth that already fill that role. And he's a great villain. He really is. He's a great idea. I think he's handled much better in the video game that we've talked about, the PlayStation video game, than I think he's been handled in the books, and I think that's only because he had more time to marinate in the video game as the actual villain, where it feels like he's kind of introduced here and then we're done with him. So I feel like that's what's lacking here because we literally had a cosmic reboot. It just doesn't feel like Spider-Man. The realism, the history, the continuity had been broken. And so I can recognize this has all the elements of a good Spider-Man story. It just feels hollow because we don't have that continuing thread from what came before. Having said all that, though, I really like McNiven's art. I've been reading a lot of classic comics lately, obviously, so seeing modern art is a little bit jarring, but I think that's mostly due to digital coloring, right? That has nothing to do with McNiven. The art is great. It's just it takes a little bit to turn my mind onto modern comics.
Yeah, I think it's a shading. The classic goes a lot
Sure.
flatter and stuff like that. Um, I I understand your point with like the unearnedness of Mr. Negative, but I guess my counterpoint to that would be everything else is unearned in this too. Like that's the whole point of like ripping the band-aid off and having a new number one, right? Like we
Hmm.
like Lily Hollister falls out of the sky, right? The Dexter Bennett comes out of nowhere, right? Like everybody's like coming to the scene as we're just sort of crafting this new storyline, the same way we would if like Spider-Man kicked off like a second or third title with a new number one. We kind of would be introduced to a whole bunch of new characters there. So, and maybe it wouldn't be as dramatic for that, but we do have we're on the heels of the universe reset here, right? Or whatever you want to call it that happened. So I understand it, but I guess I'm not, of all of the things that just dropped out of the sky, I'm not gonna fault Mr. Negative when, Harry just came back from the dead with no explanation. So
Yeah. No, and I didn't mean to imply that this is all Mr. Negative's fault. He's just an example
yeah,
of
I
why this
gotcha.
feels so hollowed, right?
Yeah.
It's everything feels hollow because because it's not a new number one, right? It's 546, right? But even still, it breaks what made Marvel is this regular continuity that continues on and on. All right, you want to restart the universe. That's what DC does, isn't it? So, but I guess that's where we are now with Marvel. But
Well, I
all
mean,
right,
it all still happened. We'll continue to talk about it, but there are some bonus pages in this book I realized before we go on to the next story arc. Did you have notes on them, or do you want me to just flip through them real
I
quick?
didn't take notes on them because they are it's little teases of different members of the Brain Trust going forward and what they're going to cover, right?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of where this guy's going, and nor am I of this art for these pages here at the end. But it is nice to like just spend a little bit of time with Aunt May, and not be crocheting or whatever the heck she did in previous books. So, um, that this is somewhat interesting. It is a little odd though. Like she's sitting there with this like Mr. T gang member, and like standing up to him. So that feels slightly out of character. But otherwise, fine. Um,
Might add these little extra pages that you're flipping through here at the end
mhm.
of is it the first issue or the first arc?
First arc. So it's the end of yeah. What is it?
The
548.
548. Okay. I think these are meant to be that what I mentioned was missing, right? Those little hints, the subplots that would come before that would lead into the big story.
Sure.
They're starting them here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And starting to weave that in. So,
Right.
technically that's something that will improve with time, but I'll have some other
I mean,
criticisms about that
technically,
later.
Mr. Negative was teased in the free comic book day. They just didn't have any other runway. You know that
Yeah.
Overdrive was doing a mission for him. So, but yeah, I got you. Um, and then I think Harry and the Hollisters is a pretty funny pun. Um, so,
Yep.
little Harry and the Hendersons thing. But yeah, we can jump over to the next story arc.
All right, let's do that. Pause it here. Do,
All right, I think we're not going to pause. We're going to keep going. Here we go.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So, next arc, this is Amazing Spider-Man number 549 to 551. Titles include Who's That Girl, The Menace of Menace, and Lo, There Shall Come a Menace. This is written by Mark Guggenheim, art by Salvador LaRocca. This is relatively early in Guggenheim's career. He had interned at Marvel in the 90s and had wrote for DC's Flash in 2006. He then made the move to Marvel for Amazing Spider-Man, but soon after he would then jump to television, being the co-creator of Eli Stone, and then being part of the team that would adapt Green Arrow into the successful WB TV show just called Arrow, and that of course launched DC's numerous TV adaptations, which became known as the Arrowverse. Salvador Larroca was apparently a cartographer from Spain who transitioned to comics in the 80s when he worked for Marvel UK. From there, he shifted to North American comics, initially at DC, then transitioned to Marvel in the 90s. He drew the Heroes Reborn miniseries and then worked with Chris Claremont on the Fantastic Four. He then did a number of X-Men titles before his move to Spider-Man.
I think he actually ended up writing Fantastic Four towards the end there too.
Was he?
I
I'm not
think
sure if I read that
so.
era.
Claremont writes like I don't know up to what issue, but like the Heroes Reborn era of Fantastic Four, Heroes Return era of Fantastic Four has I think 4 complete collections, and I'm pretty sure LaRocca writes and draws the last complete collection, or at least some arcs and I'd have to
Hmm.
double check that, but yeah, he advances there. I'm a big fan of his art. My only complaint is that over time his art gets a little, over the years his art has become a little bit too photo referencey, too photorealistic. He's never Greg Land problematic for me, but or Greg Land's just straight up drawing like porn scenes, like using the same panel over and but like, there's a little bit of like it takes you out of it if you're like, "Oh, I remember that movie when, I don't know, whoever, right? James Cameron was on screen and that's what he looked like or he's used as a photo reference." So,
Yeah. All right. So, as Spider Man is on his way to the new DB, which was once the Daily Bugle, I guess it only just occurred to me that the guy who bought it out is Dexter Bennett. So the DB in his initials. Maybe I caught that when I first read it, but it just occurred to me now. Anyway, an individual on a flying glider causes some havoc that puts people's lives in danger, and so as Spider-Man, Pete goes into action to save some lives. Well, this new menace has been given a name. They are called Menace. And the new head of the DB, Dexter Bennett, is willing to pay $10,000 for the first exclusive picture of Bennett, which, to a poor Peter Parker, that sounds like a pretty good idea. So Spider Man finds a means to track Menace down, during the course of which he has a run in with New York's newest registered hero, again, the redhead named Jackpot, who is uncomfortably familiar. There also is a series of murders taking place where spider tracers have been left behind, and so the unregistered Spider Man is becoming a suspect. Anyway, Spider Man and Jackpot manage to work out that Menace would be threatening a mayoral electoral debate, and they arrive at the debate just in time to save the frontrunner's life. Except that in the battle that follows, Jackpot's inexperience gets in Spider Man's way, and the mayoral candidate is impaled by Menace's glider. All right, your thoughts, Dozier?
I think this story arc's fine. When I remember reading this and thinking, all right, this is definitely not MJ. I don't care how many teases they do, and we even get a little bit of sort of confirmation of that towards the end, and then it's sort of ripped away a little bit. But I never thought for real that this was MJ, even through this first arc, as we're going here. I guess the first thing I want to point out in this issue as I quickly scroll back is do you think that this is just photo references for like movie stars, or is there, or do you think these are the writers? Like these seem a little bit like too much like real people. Um I wasn't sure. I don't know what the brain trust looked like at this point in time. Like, could that be Dan Slott sitting down drinking that coffee there? I don't know, because I know he's like full beard like nowadays and stuff like that. So I don't know what he looked like back then. But like, this guy almost looks like a little bit like Tom Hanks in the middle here. But like different. The other guy looks like he could have been dude from Blue Bloods, and Magnum PI, but different. So I don't know. These guys look a little bit too specific for me. So I'm going to assume,
Yeah,
since you're not jumping in, that you don't recognize anybody.
I don't know which issue that is since I have the floppies, and so it would be a pain for me to pull them out. I suppose the guy sitting down, from what I could see, could be Dan Slott. I was trying to find a picture of Dan Slott from that time. I had this memory of him having long hair before he started going bald, but that might have been during his Ren and Stimpy days. I'm not sure. Um,
So
but
anyway, so they
it
just
could
look a
be.
little too, I don't know, little bit too specific. Like he was drawing some people there that he knew, or adapting some movie stars and changing them slightly. Um, I like the art throughout this, though. Even if it is a little, throws me a little off sometimes with the faces. Like this face here, little creepy, a little awkward. But again, I've always been a big fan of his art. He actually does. If you think about like people remembering the marriage, there's a sensational Spider-Man annual that is in the Back in Black era, right before One More Day. That I think he draws the whole issue, and it's like it's the perfect Spider-Man and Mary Jane adventure type of story. If you don't remember that, I would seek it out, especially if you're hey, I you know shake angry fist at Cloud at them undoing the marriage type of thing. um I like that this ties into like what the status quo, but not like overly so. We get a little bit of this whole, registration and Spider-Man, you should register and stuff like that. But, beyond that, we're not like in the greater Marvel universe. We just get this random dude that apparently was in a Miss Marvel issue from the early 80s or something like that. Um, and that's about it. I think the Menace design is okay, but I was a little goblined out when after the Sins Pass. So I'm a little burned from goblins at this point in time, and I I wasn't thrilled about this character, and nothing in here makes me rethink that. It's just okay. It's just there for me.
Yeah.
I do like the ending of the story. I like all the Jonah stuff. What's going on, by the way, as I flip past that really quickly. I like um, the connections back to people at the Bugle, like we have here with um, this is supposed to be Betty, right? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
getting used to the art style. I think Salvador drew her with very, very broad shoulders here, like she's about to knock Spider-Man off the chair. Um, but I like his Spider-Man. I like all the other art in here. Again, the Spider Tracer thing is a very interesting story arc. I know that we won't get the full conclusion of that in this volume, but I actually like where it ends up in the overall Brand New Day era, as I remember it. So it's not something that just gets dropped. And and this is a great page, by the way, with the lighting and all that stuff. But ultimately, I kind of enjoy that, you know, this inexperienced hero has their own moment here that they have to you know, deal with. And it also makes me wonder, you know, where we end up going with Menace. Like, it doesn't even seem like Menace meant necessarily to do what happens here. That it really does come down to Spider-Man trying to save the day. So who's really at fault here for what happens at the end of this issue? Um, yeah, I guess that's all my thoughts. What did you think?
Yeah. Um, Again, often similar here. It's fine. I do like that dynamic that you were saying about at the end of having the experienced Spider-Man working with an upstart who thinks they know better because they're official. And making it jackpot though is just kind of another gut punch reminder of what Marvel had just erased. Um, which yeah, we're getting hints that this is not actually Mary Jane, but at the time this came out, we still really didn't know. And I think that is kind of my problem. And you've mentioned this is the creators are intentionally adding little things, little teases like this to poke the readers and piss off the longtime fans. It felt intentional in many ways. And I understand the argument of they're trying to get in new readers, but at the same time, who is already sending a bunch of money Marvel's way to buy their books? It's the longtime readers, right? You dance with the girl that got you to the dance, right? Um, it, but yeah, you've got to grow, and I get that. But anyway, my problem is I think, well, no, I've already said that. In terms of this being a Spider-Man story, it is good. It has all the elements it needs, and I like that Spider-Man is competent and capable. He has experience. I think this is something that gets lost down the road with the interpretation of the Parker luck, is they have Spider-Man just make mistakes all the time. But you know, sure, he'll make his mistakes every now and then, but again, he's competent. He knows what he's doing here. In issue 550, though, I think we get one of the problems of the brain trust and writing the comic or having a rotating creative team, and that is some inconsistency. This is when it comes to, I think, a little bit of the art, and it has to do with the Spider Tracer's serial killer, right? Um, in the previous story arc, a mugger gets a hold of one of Peter's web shooters and he accidentally shoots a spider tracer at someone, and that tracer ends up on a dead guy. Um, this is then where we get the introduction of a bunch of these murders where spider tracers were found on dead people, and the design of the tracer is different in this arc than we saw in the previous arc. There might be some explanation for that, but I don't recall seeing one as I read through this.
There,
Maybe they're meant to be unrelated,
it's right
but
here. Yeah, it's an
what
old
is
design.
it?
It's an old design. I haven't used that model in years.
Yes, right. Yeah, he's saying that, but why is there an old design out there, right?
Well,
How did that happen? That's never explained.
I can explain it to you. They will they don't reveal it here, but it's part of the mystery. When you find
Okay.
out who's behind all this, eventually, I'll be able to explain it to you.
Okay.
I don't
Then we
want to
got to leave
spoil it.
that for the next
Yeah.
volume. Sure. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Um so anyway, it feels inconsistent to me, whether that's intentional or not. It feels like, oh, this is kind of a goof up here. I'll say as an aside, though, these issues came out when I was living in England, and finding a comic shop in England is not very easy, particularly when you don't have a car. And since I was a poor college student at the time, I decided to save myself some money and a train ride because I would have to go to another city, the city of Newcastle, to find a my closest comic shop. So I decided to get a subscription to Amazing Spider-Man, and I still have the subscription mailers in the back of my comics that I've held
Nice.
on to. So I've got a nice long run starting with issue 551, where I had a subscription for a very long time.
Did they come in all bent, or did the mailers keep them secure?
You know, funny you say that. when I was at Heroes Con this last weekend, I did not realize that I had to buy a new version of 553. I saw from when we did this read-through that clearly there was a fault in how it was sent. I don't know if you can see that, but
Mm-hmm.
in the mailer there's a little hole punch there. Well, that hole punch goes through the entirety of the book.
Oh wow.
I've been saving this for this time. Since I have a replacement, it doesn't really matter. I can stick a pen through my book. The
Oh
hole
wow.
is that big. So that just jam it in there now. Why not? It's I've already got a replacement. Destruction porn. That's what we've got going on now. Ah, there we go.
Well, now you can do you can cut out various panels and start to
I
tape
can
them
make a
up.
collage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do something like that. So
Yeah, there you go. So anyway, I would not have done that had it not already been damaged. Um, but yeah, I got a replacement. So one good thing comes out of us doing this read through.
all right. All right, we're gonna hit a quick pause and then we're gonna move on to the next issues. Bear with us.
Right. Sounds great.
All right, we're back from that short pause. That was very short for you guys, a lot longer for us.
All right. So this brings us to our next arc. This is issues 552 to 554. Just Blame Spider-Man, Freak Out, and Burned. Bob Gale is writing with Phil Jimenez on pencils and inks, although he is joined by Lanning and Mickey on inks. Now, I admit to my ignorance at the time, but Bob Gale is the co writer for the film Back to the Future, and he's the co producer on all three of those films. Now, Gale was a comics fan in his youth, and he, in fact, includes in the letter pages of issue 553, which, I had. That's actually the one I just destroyed, 553, this one. In the letters pages of that, he includes a letter which he wrote to Marvel, which Marvel published in Tales of Suspense number 98. So that's going back to the late 60s, I believe. He had a short run on Daredevil, but being part of the Brain Trust is really kind of his largest comics credit, excepting he plotted the IDW Back to the Future series, which began in 2015. All right, we've already covered Phil Jimenez, of course, because he did the Free Comic Book Day issue, which started this whole thing off. All right, as for this story, a drug addict at the Feast shelter named Freak steals the donation box and makes off with it. Well, Peter's nearby and chases after him, changing into Spider-Man in order to help. Spidey retrieves the money, but Freak gets away. Freak, though, being a drug addict, also needs a fix, and he just so happens to stumble into Kurt Connor's lab, and he finds some needles, which he just assumes to be drugs. Well, rather than being any kind of narcotic, they're actually an experimental stem cells from animals, because, of course, this is the type of thing Kurt Connors does. If you don't know, he's also the lizard. So Freak takes the drugs and it transforms him into an actual freak, an amalgamation of animals, and one that also evolves after major injuries, and because he transforms into a crystallis state, and then after a while he emerges like a caterpillar and he becomes something even new. But Freak blames Spider-Man for this new condition of his. So, using his enhanced senses, Freak tracks Spidey down to a campaign rally where Peter Parker was taking photographs. He causes a bunch of havoc. Spider-Man fights him off, and after Freak finds a new meth lab in order to get his fix, Spidey confronts him again, and he apparently dies as the meth lab burns down. I say apparently because, well, he's going to come back. Then there are also a bunch of subplots revolving around taking photos for the new DB. Peter is working things out with his friends, and also the mayoral election subplot. All of that is kind of happening. Stoker, your thoughts on this one?
So I kind of like the concept of Freak, but I'm not a fan of the execution. I don't think the villain, like, he's too cartoonishly like gotta have drugs. Like he's what was the he's like the Noid, like that like that just the Noid was like a Domino's pizza mascot in the 80s that was so popular and so weird that they ended up having like a Nintendo video game for the Noid. But so I like the origin here is like very close to the Sentry's origin. drug addict, like just stumbles into a science lab, takes the drugs, and gets powers from it. I do like the connection to the lizard. I think that's a good way to sort of like slowly, make some connections to Spider-Man's rogues gallery while still trying to focus on introducing new characters here. I like the bar with no name stuff. I'm a fan of these background characters, these background villains, and I feel like that ultimately evolves into things that we get with like that sort of like deadly foes of Superior Spider-Man stuff much later on. Um, with like this whole concept of like let's continue to explore the A-list or D-list villains background. Um, so that's all good. I like the subplots of the side characters of whether we're at the DB or whether we're talking about the Carly Cooper being in some of these things. I still don't care that much about Lily Hollister, but the mayor election is going to be a theme throughout this run. So we got to start focusing a little bit on her dad. Um, I like the concept here that this is the first idea of Spider-Man starting to, or Peter Parker, starting to trade a little bit of uh his self-righteousness of his I don't know what the right word is, but like he's going after the money here, right? He's going to take these like little pictures of that's going to make this guy look bad. This feels innocent enough to him, and this will have a payoff in another storyline where he'll almost like go full villain from Harry's perspective in that storyline about what he's doing, and realize the error of his ways. So what I like about this isn't like he's incompetent or he like made a mistake. This is a slow build up that kind of starts in this story arc and pays off later where he just gets seduced by something and makes a mistake. Like you can kind of almost see this as sort of a natural thing. And I think it makes Peter human, right? Like he's not like this, he's not Superman, he's not Captain, he's not Steve Rogers. Like he's gonna make mistakes like this as we go through this stuff. I think the freak powers are interesting, but again, like it's just maybe it's just like too much too soon. Like it's like every issue he looks completely different. It'd be nice if that was maybe stretched across like multiple story arcs. Like I feel like we're gonna burn through him too quickly. No pun intended with the burning scene that we see here. I think some of the art is like really solid. I'm still not the biggest fan of Phil Jimenez as his actual Spider-Man, but there's less in here that bothers me. I think the scenes in the burning warehouse burning house in this last issue
Yeah.
that I'm fast forwarding are pretty well done, especially when it comes to like the panel layouts. I
The
also
border of flames, that one was
yeah.
really cool.
And I think that's in the next page here, but I wanted to stop here because the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly was the um the really pushing the boundaries of not having the comics code. There's full on drug use. Like he's smoking meth on this page. Um and that's a little surprising to have in a book like this. It's obviously not painted in a positive light, as it shouldn't be. It's obviously set up to show the negative side. I mean, the drug dealers are dead in the background, and this guy, this freak, is negative. But like, this isn't like some off-panel random white powder, and we don't talk about it or what have you. I mean, he straight up just murdered some drug dealers just to smoke some meth. So, that's I don't know that story-wise it lands for me because like it's almost treated as like a little bit of like a joke in the sense that this character is like so over the top. But like it's interesting that they're pushing those boundaries, I guess, in here. So I those are really my thoughts. Like I'm not like this isn't my favorite story arc. It's not my favorite villain, but I don't hate this storyline. I just it's just kind of there for me. I'm more interested in the side characters in this storyline than I am with the main villain. I don't think that the main villain is a bad concept. I just think that like not my favorite execution. So I'll pause it here on here and get your thoughts.
Yeah. No, I'm with you with the villain. He reminds me a little too much of Vermin from Kraven's Last Hunt. Um, and I guess the motivations are certainly different because, this guy just wants a bunch of drugs, whereas Vermin is just kind of creepy crawly in the sewer or whatever. But still, they just give similar vibes. They just are such, I don't know how to describe it. They're freaks, right? But not in a good way like you want. Um, I think in this story arc, also agree they're doing a really good job of establishing more of Peter's personal life. But since so many of these characters are new and unestablished, I don't really care about them yet. Um, and maybe that will grow in time. Although again, I've read them before, and most of them are forgettable, except for a couple for various reasons I'm not going to spoil. Um, Tom Brevoort wrote a manifesto, which is in the extra stuff in the back of this. It was in the swing shift one shot as well. But according to that manifesto, the Spider-Man manifesto, the plan was to slowly introduce a new supporting cast. But we've already had three new villains. We've had Jackpot, maybe five new people in Peter's private life. Never mind the jarring return of Harry Osborn back from the dead. Except that he's not back from the dead. He was in Europe, but for us, he's back from the dead. It just seems like a lot in a very short period of time. This doesn't feel like the slow burn that was the theory. And I didn't mean burn as a pun given the page that's up there, but here we are. To your point about Jimenez's art, yeah, it is a little strange. I noticed that in this one. It didn't hit me so much in the one shot. In a way, it's kind of Bagley-esque because he has very big eyes. He draws him very tall with a very narrow head. But something still feels off. And I kind of wonder if part of it is there's no depth to his face, right? You don't really, when he's wearing the mask, you don't see an indentation from his nose, which stands out after we've looked at McNiven and LaRocca, who are adding that kind of depth to him. So I think that is, at least that's my sussing out
That
of why
might
it
be
looks
it. It
weird.
might be the nose indent missing that's throwing me off because it's the head shape. Because I don't mind these scenes later when his mask is half ripped. Like I think this looks really good on this page. But yeah, those last panels I was just zooming in on. I think you might have something there. I think it's the head
Yeah.
shape.
Yeah, and I don't think that matters. Well, the head shape I think matters. I think he draws some very almond shape for his head. The nose indentation, back in the '60s or whatever, that wouldn't stand out at all. Even in the '80s and the '90s, that doesn't stand out. But in this modern era, you've got better coloring, better shading, and like I said, we saw McNiven and LaRocca have indentations for his nose. And so to then jump to this style and have that missing, yeah, it feels off. It feels weird.
Yeah.
All right, should we move on to the next arc?
Yeah, let's do it. Let me see here. Right spot. I'm the driver. I'm the one that has to move on the next. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. The one we've all been waiting for, right? This is Amazing Spider-Man number 555 to 557. Sometimes it snows in April is the first issue, which I don't know why that's written to make it sound like that's a weird thing because at least where I grew up, it would always snow in April. But by May you were done with the snow. But I grew up in the mountains, so
Yeah, I think
uh,
like New York, Philly area where I'm outside of Philly. I think we've had snow in March, but April is a rarer, event for.
in growing up in Colorado, it would snow in April, but it wouldn't stick,
Right,
right? It
right.
might stick to your yard, but it wouldn't stick on the road. So come April, I always felt safe driving, even if it snowed. I'm now in North Carolina, and we're lucky if it snows once a year. But anyway, um, okay, so sometimes it snows in April is the first issue. The Last Nameless Day and then Dead of Winter are three issues. This one is written by Zeb Wells and art by Chris Bachalo or Bacalo. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Chris. It's weird that I couldn't find a whole lot on Zeb Wells's career beyond him also being from Colorado. And besides comics, he also wrote and directed some episodes of Robot Chicken. Are you familiar with Robot
Oh
Chicken?
yeah.
Yeah, okay. This is a television knockoff of Twisted Toy Fair Theater, which Seth Green created. And he grabbed some people who did Twisted Toy Fair Theater. Toy Fair was a sister magazine of Wizard magazine, but focusing on toys. And I couldn't find anything about him actually working for Toy Fair, so I dug through my old. I have the trade paperbacks of the Twisted Toy Fair theater, and not any actual Toy Fair issues, but I couldn't find him in there. So I guess just Robot Chicken is what he did. He also did the stop motion superhero comedy Super Mansion that came out before Robot Chicken. And let's see, Wells did work at Marvel before Spider-Man for a couple of years, although I don't have in my notes what he did. It could be I couldn't find out. And Wells would, of course, come back as the writer for Spider-Man in 2022. He did a recent run, the Wells run, as we've called it, and we might have some words on that. Chris Bachalo began working for DC in the 90s, but did his first work at Marvel on X-Men Unlimited #1 in 1994, and he became the co-creator of Generation X. It's around this time that his style, though, starts to change to be more heavily influenced by manga, which we can kind of see in some of his art in these issues, but most of his work at Marvel has been on X-Men titles. All right, so for this storyline, as snow is coming down, Spidey receives an ominous prediction from Doctor Strange that this is a supernatural snow. We'd gotten some hints in previous issues that a big storm's coming. Well, here it is. Well, as Spidey is wandering through the snow, he rescues a theoretical mathematician named Rabin, who has been attacked by Mayan extremists. Well, Rabin has worked out a new form of numbers beyond just the binary that we use in computers, one that involves symbols that look suspiciously like Mayan glyphs. Well, Spidey rescues Rabin and drops him and his attackers off at the police station, where growing support cast members Vic Gonzalez and Officer O'Neill work. And oh yeah, Carly Cooper is there too. She's a forensics investigator officer, something like that. Anyway, Rabin sends Spidey back out to find his friends who had been locked in a van, but back in the precinct, Rabin actually kills his attackers and he takes Carly Cooper hostage. Well, it turns out Rabin is actually making a blood sacrifice to a Mayan god in order to merge with it, so Rabin's actually the bad guy here. Well, back out in the storm, Spidey encounters said Mayan god, and with the help of a homeless friend named Verl, he keeps the god at bay. But Rabin arrives with Carly Cooper to sacrifice her and to finally merge with the god, but Spidey and Verl and a squad of homeless guys delay the attack long enough for the mystic window to close and the god disappears. All right, Stoker, your thoughts on this one?
I like Chris's art. I get a little lost in it sometimes, though. It's sometimes a little hard to figure out like who's who and what's what. Like I guess Carly kind of looks like Carly on here, but like Vin doesn't look like Vin in this first panel here. Like I would like if you just showed me this first top panel that I have here, I wouldn't necessarily have thought that that was Vin as he's been drawn on previous pages. I really like the Spider-Man and homeless guy interactions. I like the Wolverine little guest star, but there's something about this storyline that feels like it's slightly off. Like we have the new Avengers sort of like shoehorned in here and then quickly ripped away. Like why did they have to leave? Like why is Doctor Strange and Wolverine not in the whole 3-issue arc or whatever? The whole Mayan thing, the twist, and the snowstorm like make it feel like there's just too much going on. Like pick 2 out of 3 of those maybe. But having all 3 feels like a bit much. I think like the designs are cool, but I don't like where is this guy coming from? Like where is this Mayan thing? Like I get it, something with the glyphs and whatever Raven did and or whatever, but like there's no backstory. It's just like we're just supposed to accept that there's this thing here. And we're like, it almost in that way, it's a little bit like JMS wrote this story with like the way he's introducing sort of some magical or supernatural elements in Spider-Man lore. So It's like I there's a part of me that feels like, oh, we just did that. Like, let's, we're not, we're back to some street level things in Brand New Day. So why are we going back to the well with Wells for this, thing? No pun intended, but I'll take it if it's there. Um, the again, the twist is interesting, but the way that the art is set up here, it loses something for me because like, how did he get the cage open? Like, why does he not look anything like why did he rip his shirt off? Like, why does he look nothing like he did in the previous panels? And I was almost scratching my head a little bit to understand, like, oh wait, was he inside there, was he outside there, was it one of the guys that picked the locks? And obviously the words are there to make sense of it, but from like just an art perspective, it kind of threw me off. So to me, this was somewhat of a forgettable storyline at the end of the day. The twist was somewhat interesting. It's fun to see Spider-Man in the snow and stuff like that, but beyond that, I wouldn't remember this in 20 years if not for other reasons. We'll get to it. Your
Why
thoughts?
would you have to remember it in 20 years, right? Yeah, mystic stuff, right? Really should not be in Spider-Man books. Another problem with how One More Day was happened is because magic should wait. Spider-Man is about science, right? Um, Again, at least it's wrapped up in 3 issues, and we'll never have to deal with Mayan glyphs or Mayan gods again. Of course, I'm joking, and we'll explain why in a moment. This is fine, I guess. I do like how we at least got some hints that this story and this weather event was coming in some of the previous issues of Spider-Man. That seemed to be one of the Brain Trust's attempts to have this continuity thread that I was complaining about earlier. But it's not as strong as a regular interweaving subplot like we used to get. I do like Bakalow's art, particularly the winter scenes. I like a good occasional winter story because it is very striking. It's very different, right? It stands out. But his style is so different than, say, LaRocca's that it does kind of become jarring to make that shift, right? And maybe one criticism I'll have for the art, and let me be clear, I like the art, but let's say the Mayan god in particular is too complicated of a design. There's a double page spread in one of these issues, and I don't remember which one it is, but the Mayan god, you might actually be coming up on it there, Stoger. Maybe the next one from there? Maybe not. Um, that Mayan god attacks Spider-Man across the double page spread, and it's actually kind of a weird, clever way that they're. Oh, you might have just passed it. Um, Sorry, man. I wish I wrote
No,
down which
I
issue.
had
That's it. That's
I
it.
had it up earlier. That's why I was kind of flipping back to find it. So there you go.
Okay, in reading the actual comic, this actually stands out better on the digital version there, but you can see how he attacks in the second panel on the right-hand page into the second panel on the first-hand page, but reading it, they're not in sync, like that's happening different in time. And then, yeah, that one he's attacking from the third panel into the fourth panel on the first page. It's really kind of an interesting idea that conveys that this god is out of time, out of sync, and so forth. But his design is so complicated that it's really hard to pick up on that. It took me a minute to realize just what the heck was going on there. So yeah, it's clever, it's neat, but it's just too complicated.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
with you. It feels like it's like I love his art, but I always feel like I have to like slow down to really like understand everything and take it all in. And sometimes that doesn't work.
yeah, and I think one of my main criticisms I'm going to have for this book is that having multiple creators leads to some disconnected stories, even though we have this brain trust that's supposedly working together. But in issue 555, I think we have an instance of that inconsistency. In the Mark Guggenheim arc, Spidey is making fun of Jackpot and deriding her for wanting to have a team up. But in this arc, he's practically begging to have a team up with Wolverine, right? So it's again the lack of consistency that just kind of becomes a I don't know it's just jarring. It just feels unnatural.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean it's an interesting experiment, and you're probably pointing out some
Oh
reasons
yeah,
why they haven't ever gone back to it. But I'm surprised that I guess I'm giving them more credit in the sense that I'm surprised that they were uh as tied together as they were and still able to get all this stuff out, you know. So,
sure.
you know.
And I mean, if we want to discuss it, I do think it is a clever idea on paper, and
Mhm.
I think they discovered in practice where there are problems
Yeah.
with it. I think a better way to do it is have one prolific author with multiple artists that you would run through, and that's basically what they did with Dan Slott's run, right? Um, so uh, yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's definitely I as I flip through like New Avengers, Modern Volume 4, the Secret Invasion one, it definitely feels like that's what they did with Bendis is because when you're reading that, um, you get an issue with one artist and they're telling one part of a storyline. And then you get to the next issue and it's a completely different artist telling a completely different story. But they're all woven into the overall story of Secret Invasion. And this is might be where you were recalling where some of it's a little confusing because there's so much jumping around, right? Um,
mhm.
but they're almost like not in order in a way, right? It's like um and you weren't were you a Game of Thrones person? Did you watch Game of Thrones?
No, I read the first book in 2003 and I
Okay.
enjoyed it, but I didn't have time to keep reading
All
and
right.
I've never had a cable subscription or anything, so I've never watched the TV
So
show.
so I use that as an example of just a large ensemble cast where there's a lot of jumping around where you have to if you're going to keep up with everybody, you're going to spend an episode sometimes a few minutes with this person, then a few minutes with somebody else in different location, so on and so forth. And that's the way that that Bendis stuff felt. And then if you throw in a different artist in their things, um, it's all interweaving into one story, but you're sort of like, you're slowly catching up with people. You're not getting an hour's worth of progress with one person. You're getting 10 minutes worth of progress with six people, so to speak. So all right. Anything else on this story arc before we move to the next slide?
No, I think we're good to go to the next one. This next one's just going to be a single issue.
Well, before we do that though,
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're right. I forgot.
why is this storyline important? Well, this storyline is referenced again many years later, at the end of our at the beginning of the Zeb Wells Amazing Spider-Man run. So, volume, I want to say it's volume 6. I think we're on volume 7 now of the
I
Amazing
don't even know.
Spider-Man reboots. Um, so at the beginning of volume 6, there is a mystery that something happens, and we find out that Mary Jane is now not with Peter, and she's with this dude named Paul, and everybody hates Paul. I don't know how you can hate somebody that with that luscious man bun, but we all hated Paul. And who is Paul? Well, Paul is the son of Rabin or whatever. So we'll find out that mystery in volume 6. So future storyline here that I'm spoiling, but everybody hates Paul, so I don't think anybody cares that I'm spoiling it. But this Mayan and Rabin and all come back, and because time doesn't make sense, Rabin's son advances in age and is in that other dimension during this whole time, and comes out of that dimension in volume 6, and for reasons that you'll have to read in Zeb Wells' future Spider-Man run is with Mary Jane and helps her with all the things that she does to get her hours. And then ultimately though, not all of the spoilers, but this last panel is them breaking up. So there will come an end to the tyranny that Paul and his man bun bring.
I will say when Zeb Wells started this run that you're now talking about on Spider-Man, and he brought in this character Paul Rabin and all the Mayan stuff again. I had no recollection of this Brand New Day storyline whatsoever. I did not remember it at all. Um, I listened to several different podcasts, and I believe it was the Spider-Man Crawl Space podcast where one of the panelists, the Spider Yoda, they call him, and now I'm blanking on his name. I feel so bad about that. Um, JR. JR is his name. Very funny guy, but he, I believe, brought up the connection. I was like, oh, yeah, God, completely forgotten about that. Um, but yeah, God, Paul, I am behind on my Spider-Man reading. Just today, I was reading Amazing Spider-Man issue 25 in whatever volume this is, but Legacy number 989. And there's a character in here talking to Paul. I feel like I want to read this because Joe Kelly, the author of this one, I think was saying what all of us, I don't want to put words in everyone's mouth, but what I and many others, I believe, are thinking about Paul. He says, I hate that you simp around like Mr. Tryhard Top Knot, hoping people are going to like you, when everyone knows you're an interdimensional expletive who never got his expletive together. But I don't care about you enough to hate you. I don't care about you at all. That, I think, is Spider Man fandom as it relates to Paul.
Yeah, look, my take on early Paul, so like, the one that was in volume 6, the first panel, this nonsense that we get later with him helping her get powers and then, following each other in the other book, is, silly stupidity in my, but my take on Paul during Zeb Wells' run is like, I don't like it. But if you were going to use this to separate Peter and Mary Jane and say that, like, definitively, like, they're not going to get back together, you're not supposed to like no divorced dad likes the new boyfriend or the new husband of his ex-wife. Like, you're not supposed to like Paul, right?
Mhm.
So, like, make him as hateable as you want so that you don't like, so you have somebody to, a villain to hate, so to speak, right? Obviously it probably went too far, because he's so reviled. But anyway, we've given him enough airtime. So.
Yeah, that's right. He doesn't deserve it. All right. Amazing Spider-Man number 558. This one is just a single one shot here. Freak the Third is what this is called. Written by Bob Gale, pencils by Barry Kitson. Of course, we've talked about Bob Gale already. Barry Kitson was an artist for Marvel UK and started doing DC work in the late 80s. He moved to Marvel in 2007, presumably to be part of the Spider-Man group. All right, so we get a one-shot story here, which makes me wonder if this was supposed to be one of those filler issues because regular production started slowing down, or if the story was necessary to put here because of the circumstances of the Freak storyline and then the end of the Mayan Winter storyline, because Freak went into a cocoon again, and once the weather warms up, he was going to come out again. I don't really know. Anyway, Spidey decides to follow up on Freak, whom they need to cover in quicklime while he is in his Crystallis form in order to prevent him from reemerging and becoming a threat again. Well, while Kirk Connors works on getting the quicklime, Peter attends a Hollister campaign rally at the Feast Center and has another encounter with Menace, who decides to menace candidate Hollister. Well, Spidey leaves Menace to run away as he tries to deal with Freak, who just so happens to reemerge stronger than ever. But getting Freak to mistake the quicklime for drugs is apparently enough to put him back in a Crystallis and send him away to the freezer. All right, your thoughts, Dozier?
It's fine. I mean, like, should have been part of the other storyline, but I understand why they broke it up. Splitting it out with the winter gives them a little bit of buffer. Bob Gale wrote a 4-parter instead of a 3-parter before. Whatever, it's fine. I'm not gonna hate on it. It seems silly. Like, it seems like we're just playing into this like silly nature. Like, he's like, drugs, drugs, drugs. I gotta have my drugs. And he just like rips it apart and snorts it. It's just like, I don't know. I like the villains to be a little bit more complicated, have a little bit more depth. I know, like, before in the last issue, you kind of said he reminds you of Vermin, but Vermin's like an incredibly complex character, right? Like, so he's a child. There's literally a storyline, the child within, that kind of reveals all that and talks about it. So This guy's just, you know, like cartoonishly silly in my view. What do you think?
You know, I think I need to clip you saying drugs, drugs, drugs. I got to have my drugs so I can put that on the soundboard. I need to start. I need to
Eh,
start curating that a little bit.
I, everybody's got their vices. Everybody's got their vices.
I'm not going to judge, right? Um, I think this issue is decent for connecting a lot of threads that we've seen in this run so far on Spider-Man, and having Dr. Connors here also, as you mentioned before, has the benefit of bringing in one of Spider-Man's past villains for continuity's sake. But not actually have the lizard here to be the villain. So that's good too. We get some heavy hints here about the real identity of Malice, right? Now, I'm not going to spoil that for anyone who hasn't read this before, since Malice is the mystery person that ties a lot of these stories together. But now that I know that, and this is the first time I've reread it, it gets laid on rather thick as to who Malice is.
Menace.
But I guess Menace. That's
I
right.
wasn't
I
going to
said
correct you, but you said it 3 times, so I had to, at some point I had to fix it.
No, you're absolutely right. Again, I could tell I was reading X-Men because, Malice had taken
Yeah.
over Polaris. That's where we were. Man, I'm sorry. Yes, Menace. So yeah, it's laid on thick here, and I guess I'll give compliments to Gail, right, the author, that I I didn't catch it when I read it the first time, but I can see it now when I read it for the second time.
Yeah.
So good on them. Interestingly, the floppy for this issue has an advertisement in it for two new artists who are going to join the rotating stable of creators. This is going to be Mike McCone and Andy Lanning. And I don't know if that means that that means two other artists are backing out, or if they needed another couple of artists to pick up the slack. I'm not really sure what happened there. Although I will
Yeah,
say,
I don't think any of them
I
are
was going to
permanent. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, we're back and forth in here. Mike McComb was at Heroes Con, and I meant to bring the issue that he begins in to talk to him and sign it, but I got stuck in the line for the Simonsons for about 4 hours, so I kind of had enough after that. Go ahead.
I don't know how you stayed in that line for that long. No, I was just gonna
I
say
can tell you the story if you want.
it's okay.
It was not intentional, I assure you.
I don't know that like I guess maybe I'd have to flip through the future volumes. Like I never got the sense any of these people were permanent. Like I thought it was, to me it was like, they might come back for a couple storylines, but like, just keep mixing in other artists, like, call another person off the bench just to keep the train moving. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and maybe that was a misconception of mine because the brain trust of writers are the permanent four
Mhm.
group that rotate. And I guess maybe I just assumed that they would be paired up with an artist. If they're not, then maybe that's another complaint of mine, that we constantly have a changing style for Spider-Man, and that just makes it well jarring. I keep using that word, but
Mhm.
that's just what it is. All right, we ready for the next ones?
Yep.
All right, this is Amazing Spider-Man 559 to 561. These, as a whole, is called Peter Parker Paparazzi. So we at least have a single title for this group now. This is written by Dan Slott, art by Marcos Martin. Now, Martin is another Spanish artist who started doing cover work for Marvel's Spanish edition comics. He did a few fill-in issues in DC, but then came over to Marvel in the early 2000s. All right, so in this, yeah, there's that little nose, right? Um, Spider-Man meets Screwball for the first time. Screwball is an internet streamer who commits crime for an audience, and for some reason, Spidey is unable to catch her. But this sets up the theme for this arc. The new editor of the DB decides to make Peter a paparazzo to take scandal photos of celebrities. And Peter's really good at it because of his spider powers. He can get unflattering photos of an actor named Bobby Carr who is assaulting a waitress, and that leads to the waitress suing the actor. But the waitress is then killed because there is a superpowered woman with an unhealthy obsession with Carr. Spidey dubs her the paper doll because she is as Flatman from the Great Lake Avengers. She can also compress her victims and make them flat, essentially suffocating them to death. Well, despite the attack, the DB wants more car photos, particularly of some mystery girlfriend that he's been dating, which DB will pay $2 million for a photograph of her. So Peter continues and eventually has to protect Bobby Carr from Paper Doll in Carr's own house. And after a conversation with Carr, Pete decides that he cannot continue being a sleazeball paparazzi. Oh, and of course, the mystery girlfriend is Mary Jane Watson, because the Brain Trust knows that that would piss off long term readers. I'm getting my jabs in.
All right. So so
Sorry.
this might be my favorite storyline in the whole book, to be honest with you.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
I think the opening storyline with McNiven and this are probably, if I was ranking the storylines, and I'm doing this off the top of my head here, are some of my favorite. I'm a big fan of Marcos's art. I think that his art gets better. This isn't even as good as it can be. And he'll be a recurring collaborator with Dan Slott throughout his entire run. In fact, he will close out his run with issue 801. I know that Dan does additional issues after that, but his last official Amazing Spider-Man was 801, which is done by Marcos, and I think his art is just, you know so well done, shows different fluid of movements and characters, and just a huge fan of it throughout this. So while there's not necessarily big examples in this story, this book, of that art, in the future there'll be some really good examples of that, and always happy to see when his stuff comes to play. I like some of the experimentation, like on this cover here, where you see sort of like pop art and things like that. Um, I alluded to earlier that the idea of like Peter sort of stumbling into a mistake here, and like, getting a little seduced by the money, and not thinking of the celebrities as a real person, and going through that to get these pictures, and how Harry's kind of calling him out on it. I think that's you know I like that. Like, you maybe people would say like that plays into Peter making a mistake, and why is he doing that? He should know better. But I think it's a very human thing to do. Like, you could know that it's wrong and still just make a mistake, like in the sense of like, I was all caught up in the moment and things of that nature. Not only is he chasing the money, but he's good at this. To what you said, he's able to duck away and hide, and sort of trick people, so on and so forth. um the Let's see here, going through this stuff, what I don't like is, I think this is a great panel here, by the way. What I don't like is, we'll get this in the beginning of the next issue, I think, is the quick origin of Paper Doll. It's just kind of like, our parents were like at some like super compressor or something like that, and it's just like very quickly yada yada past her stuff. I would like to see this villain come back. To my knowledge, she's never come back after this. Um, I can't think of a Paper Doll storyline after this. I could be wrong.
I feel
Um,
like there was like a brief one issue or something where she was back, but I could be wrong too.
I very well could miss it, but if that's the case, then she had like one additional thing. It's not like she's a recurring. What I will say is a crime, though, is that Screwball is not a more recurring character. It sounded like you were alluding to like, how is she getting away from Spider-Man? I'm with you. Like, they would need to explain why she's so agile that she could elude Spider-Man. But this concept in this social media age of somebody live streaming their things, they play this up in the video game where Spider-Man has to do certain feats to get more likes, because he's got to, or else Screwball's gonna blow something up or whatever it was in the video game. um but I think this is like such a cool little quirky character. It's a silly character. I'm not saying this is like the next that, right? But I think it's like such a silly little modern character that we do throughout here. Fast forwarding to the reveal of Mary Jane, and well, I don't like the teases of things, but I actually don't get sucked into this issue as a tease. She's not teasing being teased here as if she's getting back with Peter. She's not being teased here as like a love interest, will they, won't they? In fact, quite the opposite. In the beginning of the next issue, she's she's sleeping with this guy. Like they're a couple. They're in bed together. They're not sugarcoating that like she still has feelings for Peter, and this guy's just pawning for her. Like they've moved on and she's somewhere else. And as much as that might anger or pain old readers, I respect the commitment to the new status quo, and we're going to follow through with this. Now, I would just as much rather just ship her off to the West Coast and not have her in here at all. Don't get me wrong. But I like the idea of like, integrating her into this. The other thing that's happening here is like we don't know what she knows at this time, at
Yeah, I was
least.
gonna say there is a tease here
And that
because
is
of
the
that.
tease. That is the interesting tease. I find it interesting. I don't necessarily love it because, like, again, like it gives you this out where they could undo everything. Like, I'm still burned from the baby thing, right? So I'm like, when are they going to go back and find the baby? And they never do, right? But like, then why did you tease me that the baby could be found, right? Why were they? And I think they do explain that, by the way, in some story I just never read. But again, it was like too little, too late. But this whole scene of her in the panic room and him not being able to hear her and clearly and know like who she is, but like them sort of communicating, like I thought this was like really well done. And I just enjoyed that. Granted, I understand people's anger with it, with sort of stop rubbing it in our face that they're not together anymore, right? I'd much rather her not be in this issue. But if you're gonna bring her into this, this was a pretty interesting way to do it. And that ending scene of like, she's not Jackpot and she's leaving. When are you gonna be back? Hell if I know. I love this. Like I love that they're like, they're sending her on her way. They don't know when she's gonna be back. Here's your little MJ fix, but you're not going to see her that often. Um, anyway, we will see her more often, but that doesn't stop. But she doesn't come back until I think quite a while, if I remember correctly. I don't think she
I think
actually.
it's a while, but I don't remember.
I don't think she comes back till Aunt May gets married. It's the wedding issue.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
honestly do not remember.
Anyway, your thoughts.
Um, so I'll address MJ first here. I think her being Bobby Carr's mystery girlfriend is again an obvious ploy and a punch in the gut. And that's mostly because I would wonder why MJ would be dating a guy who is such an asshole, right? She respects herself more than that. She's a better character than that. So having her date this guy who, again, we saw in a panel with uh, no impetus whatsoever, him just screaming at a waitress who all she wanted to do was express how much of a fan she was, right? Um, I think this is Marvel dumping on a longtime beloved character. That's what it felt like, or not Marvel necessarily, but the writers anyway. During the fight with Paper Doll, I think MJ seems more like herself. She's not the mopey MJ that we did admittedly get a lot in the 90s, and that's what Marvel seemed to be intent on fixing with One More Day. Although I think Straczynski already fixed that, but anyway, regardless, it's happened. Um, and to that tease, her saying that they knew one another, that she and Spider-Man knew one another in a former life, fed into that fan theory that MJ knew what happened with One More Day. She retained her memory of it. And despite all the assurances that no one knows who Spider-Man is, MJ does, right? That wasn't, we were told everyone had forgotten, but, well, MJ
Well,
hasn't.
yeah, at this time, that's what we understand. But once we get to one moment in time and they explain what actually happened there, like she's not like they explain how she.
Right.
But yeah,
Um,
at this time, I'm with you. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, let's see. You kind of talked about Screwball already. I'm with you that for a modern villain, she's not bad. She's really annoying, but that's also kind of the point,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I'm okay with that. The fact that she's able to elude Spider-Man as she does is wrong. She should not be able to outrun Spider-Man. But her using the cops to get away from Spider-Man, that's fair. That makes perfect sense. As for the meat of this story, I thought it was fine. Pete is motivated by a financial need and is willing to not always do the right thing, but he comes around to the right thing in the end. That's perfectly acceptable for a Spider-Man story, so I'm okay with that. Um, I think maybe it's time to address Carly Cooper in my thoughts on her because
Okay.
I think it's here I started noting something with her. Um, I recall there being a lot of backlash against her as a character when these books first came out. And I thought most of that was unfair because it seemed more of anger against what they did to MJ,
Hmm.
right? That's not really fair to Carly Cooper. But as I was reading through this story arc, it kind of became more apparent to me, why does she even have a crush on Peter to begin with, right? It's making it more and more obvious that she fancies Peter. But what has he done around her to garner her affection, right? Particularly since she knows I've forgotten his name now, Gonzalez, the other cop, and this other cop, she knows better, and he clearly seems to fancy her and is trying to make some moves. Now, granted, that doesn't mean just because Gonzalez has feelings for her that that has to be reciprocated, right? But why Peter? Peter's done nothing. He hasn't done anything to earn her affection, so it seems contrived. It doesn't seem real or earned. Um,
I think it goes back
and
to like your feeling of like they just dropped everybody into this universe though, because
that could be
like
it.
they're like the what you're supposed to assume is that Harry, Lily, Harley, and Peter are like a friend group that's been hanging out
Well,
for a while.
okay, but doesn't Harry actually introduce them in that very first issue? Like he says, "Hey, this is my girlfriend Lily, and this is her roommate Carly."
Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I guess I thought the idea was that they were hanging out, but maybe you're right. But
Um, I,
I'll look it up while you're
Again, I
talking.
could be wrong, but I think that was my impression. So, um,
Yeah,
yeah,
you keep talking. I'll look it up.
no, that's fine. So, I it just gives the impression that it's been predetermined by the brain trust that they're going to be an item because it just feels unearned at all, and I think that's the problem of writing by committee, right? Say if we go back to Maximum Carnage in the 90s, right? That had problems of a lack of continuity that people thought they were on page or whatever, and it just feels a little disjointed at times. So that's all I have to say. I do have one last thing about that cover for issue 560 that you pointed out before, but
Yeah.
I'll let you.
Yeah. I
Did you
mean,
find anything up early?
no. I don't want to say that you're the. I don't want to disagree with you because I didn't get to check everywhere. But like the issue starts off with like that girl on the dance floor kissing him, and then he goes back to the table and sits down, and they're all there. Like,
Okay,
but maybe in the free
maybe I'm
comic book
misremembering.
day, or again, I was flipping through quickly. So, you want to go to
Right.
560?
Yeah, the cover to 560.
Gonna give
It's
everybody a
the one that
seizure
has
real
the
quick.
pop art painting.
I don't know how to flip it quicker than this.
Yeah, there you go, right there. Um, just to give a little context, yes, it's pop art. It's kind of playing off of the famous Roy Lichtenstein pop art paintings, which were inspired by the comic art of the 1960s. Now, some argue that Roy Lichtenstein practically copied from the likes of Jack Kirby and his peers at the time. There's one of his paintings that is clearly Magneto with his helmet, right? But there's several of those in the Tate Modern in London. I don't know where else Liechtenstein has his paintings, but there's the famous one of the jet fighter, and it says Kapow or something like that on it. But yeah, it's art's imitating other art that is now imitating itself. Whatever. Yeah,
Yeah,
trying to
no.
give the context where I can,
Yeah, no. This is what you get when you get a history teacher on the podcast.
and this is what you get when you're going to subscribe to premium, right? Or
Yeah,
the
that's
deluxe edition.
true.
That's what we're calling it.
That's why you're here on Patreon with the deluxe edition.
All right, let's go to our next grip here. This is Amazing Spider-Man 562 and 563. The other Spider-Man, and so Spider-Man walks into a bar and ellipses or dot dot dot. This is written by Bob Gale, pencils by Mike McCone, and a couple of different inkers. Now, here's another mistake. I should have talked to Mike McCone at Heroes Con to ask him a little bit about his background because I couldn't find much about his background. Other than he is British and he began working at DC in the late 80s and early 90s. Still in the early to mid 90s, he moved to Marvel. His first long stretch as a penciler was on the Exiles in early 2000s, and then he had a stint on Fantastic Four before joining the artists that were working on Spider-Man.
Both great runs, by the way. I really like that Exiles book. I got all
Yeah, that's a
100
good book.
issues of it. And then he did the Fantastic Four. I want to say it was during the Civil War era. And those are some great looking issues too.
Yeah. Okay, so in the the super villain hangout called the Bar with No Name, which has existed since the start of this run. I haven't really talked about it much, but it is a new location invented at this time, and it's still around. Um, Anyway, in the bar with no name, a bookie has been taking bets on superhero fights, but he hasn't been doing too well lately, and he owes his father a lot of money. So he sets up a fight where a guy named the Brawler calls out Spider-Man online to come to a fight, and the bookie takes bets on whether Spider-Man is going to show up or not. Well, Peter gets wind of this and he decides to go as Peter Parker just so he can get pictures and keep an eye on things in case he has to change into Spider Man, which he does when another Spider Man shows up and takes out the Brawler. Well, Pete chases down the other Spider Man who happens to be Screwball in disguise, and she informs Pete about the bookie, and Spidey is able to then track the bookie down at his house or at his father's house. Except that the bookie has been taken hostage by the enforcers because the bookie fixed the event for the bets. So Spider Man takes the bookie's father to Coney Island, where the bookie is basically being tortured by the enforcers. And it just occurs to me, I think the enforcers might be one of the first villains to actually become a villain in this brand new day era, right? Sure, we had Doc Connors, but he was never the Lizard. The enforcer's the first old villain that has come back, right?
As a villain. Yeah, but like Doc's not
As a
like
villain.
reset. Like he was the Lizard in the past. But
Right.
but to your like he hasn't been the Lizard in this story in the brand new day era.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep, agreed. Okay, so anyway, as the enforcers are basically torturing the bookie, Spidey rescues the bookie and also reveals that the bookie's father had been playing them on the side, and so Spider-Man basically gets everyone to back down. Now, part of his motivation for all of this is that Spider Man believes the bookie has info on the Spider Tracer serial killer who has been setting him up. But that admittedly came out of nowhere at the start of issue 563, and that's just me being snarky about it. All right, Sojer, your thoughts?
I think this is just a fun little story arc, and I really like McCone's art. McCone did some work on a Spider-Man Fear Itself miniseries later on, where he draws instead of the costume being sort of red and blue with like shades of black for the shadows, it's much more just like red and black. And it looked really slick in that storyline. I thought it looked well. So I think his style works really well. It reminds me a bit here of like Mike Wendigo. I forget how you say his name.
Yeah, it's not Wendigo. It's I know who you're talking about, but
Where
yeah,
in Go or something
yeah,
that
something like that.
who unfortunately passed away. And he did some really good Spider-Man art. Not exactly the same, but like in the same like you're in the same family of stylistic Spider-Man art here. Um you know, don't really care much about the family drama here, but you need a little framing device just to make it interesting. I like the enforcers are involved. And I think it's just a fun little interlude story. I think it's harmless. I think it's better than okay in the sense that it's really enjoyable. Whereas like some of the freak stuff was just like, it's whatever there. But like this was like fun. I like look forward to rereading these two issues. What did you think?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. This one was good. The Spider Tracer motivation coming out of nowhere. Okay, I didn't like that, but this was good. I like how Ox was willing to give himself up in the end because he gave his word. It's like, okay, there's some depth to this character. That's good. And that's not the original Ox because I think the original Ox died at some point. So I don't know which Ox we're on with this one. And yeah, I like McCone's art. It works really well here. So yeah, this was a nice little palate cleanser.
Yeah, and like these are really old villains. Like, I mean, the
Oh
enforcers have
yeah,
been around for since like what, like
issue 10, I
10 or
believe.
something like that. Yeah, I was gonna say 10 or
Yeah.
12. Um, so yeah, I mean, like it's good to see them in here, and you know, to your point, like some of them have a little bit of a moral compass. And Ox was in the free comic book day edition. Like every time you went to the
Was he?
bar, yeah, every time you went to the bar with no name, Ox has been there. So like he's like holding up the bookie in that first issue, where he's like threatening him, was like, hey, if you're not on the up and up, or whatever he was saying at that time. So Ox has been the through line with, at least having a character that you back to. Otherwise, when you go to the bar with no name, it's a little bit of like randomness of who's going to be there. I Some of them are just cameos. Like Shriek was in the background of one. There's somebody who's dressed up like Craven in the background, but Craven's still supposed to be dead. So I don't know who that was supposed to be. It might be Craven's son or something like that was stopping in for a drink. And then like Hydro Man. But like other than that, it's these characters you got to open up like the Marvel handbook to remember who they are.
Half of them probably aren't even in the Marvel Handbook because
Yeah,
they're newer ones, right? All right, you ready to wrap this up, Stoger?
let's go for it.
Well, one last issue and then bonus stuff and so on. All right, so this is Amazing Spider-Man number 564. I did not write the title down for this one.
Three-way collision.
Three-way collision. Oh, that makes sense because this is written by three members of the Brain Trust: Mark Guggenheim, Bob Gale, and Dan Slott. Basically, all the Brain Trust minus Zeb Wells. They worked on this together. Pencils by Paulo Sequeira. Sequeira. I'm sorry, Paulo. Paulo is a Brazilian artist who started working for North American Comics in 2004. Unfortunately, I couldn't find out much more about him, at least not easily. I found a database of all the stuff he did, but it would have taken forever to sift through it, so I just left it. Okay, in this issue, Overdrive steals a weapon from Mr. Negative, and Spidey chases him down to try to stop him from endangering the public. We basically see the same story then play out from the perspective of Vince Gonzalez, who misses a Yankees game with his dad to try to stop it, and then we see it from Overdrive's perspective as well. All right, Soji, your thoughts?
I don't like this issue. What I like about it is like we get some character development for Vin, who's been a bit of a background character. To your point about there was a comment made by the writers that they would slowly introduce new characters. I think Vin fits that bill where they're not rushing. Like he's there in the background, and then it takes a couple story arcs, and now like they're he's going to be Peter's roommate, and then he'll have a bigger role to play as we go forward here. So now we're getting a little bit of background stuff on Vin, so it's a little bit more natural of that character evolving, even if it is relatively quick, right? I mean, we are, what are we, 20 or 30 issues in at this point? It's got to be. So something like that. What I hate about this issue is that this stupid power for Overdrive, it makes no sense. It's not explained. He just magically changes cars into souped up cars. It's as if the Brain Trust was drunk one night and they were watching the Fast and the Furious, and they were like, wouldn't it be cool if and like they're like, well, do we need to explain it? Nah, it's just cool. Like make the truck a super truck or something.
You know where they missed an opportunity here is the kid from the Exterminators whose mutant powers to change stuff.
Maybe that's who
That
it
could have been
is.
Overdrive.
Maybe
I
he got maybe he can walk, and now it's not him, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not. But I mean that could have been an opportunity.
at least he had a limitation for his powers that he had to like he needed mass or something like that, or like some, I don't know, it had to be something for his wheelchair or there was some silly rule. This
Yeah.
just is like this guy can jump into a car and make it into a spaceship or some nonsense that's here. I don't know. Um, the art's okay. I don't hate it. I just wish we didn't get the bait and switch on the cover. I thought I was getting a Bacalo issue when I bought it, and then we get somebody else inside. So I wish they just would have let him do the cover, like, in that sense. Um, and you know, the sort of the relationship with Vin and Carly is sort of deepened here a little bit, even though she kind of has that like visible crush on Pete, as we talked about in the last. So, but otherwise, it's not my favorite issue. It's probably my least favorite issue in the book, to be honest with you.
Yeah. It's it's fine. It feels like a filler issue. It's definitely a jam issue, right? And that's kind of interesting, right? A jam comic is where multiple creators will tell the next part of a story and releases a single comic, or it might be multiple artists doing bits here and there. Um, and I kind of wonder why they did that. And part of me thinks maybe this is the final roundup after 6 months of this rotating brain trust, because that's where we are time wise. We've had 6 months of comics, three coming out a month. Maybe they need a little more time to start the next arc of Spider-Man, and so they just kind of came up with something. I really don't know. At least in this one, they got it right that Peter's a Mets fan and he's wearing a Mets jersey. During the Zeb Wells story, he was complaining about his Yankees jacket being taken away. But no, Spider-Man's a Mets fan. But that's also a minor nitpick. That's
If you're from New York, that's a major mistake there.
but I mean, isn't that that could be, but it's long been established that he's a Mets fan.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, making mistakes like that, I don't care about that. That's so minor, it doesn't matter. But I know there's some people on the internet who like to complain about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it might like I'm looking forward. I was going to get my I was going to get my book off the shelf, but I'm just going to look online real quick. We're about to kick off a couple major storylines. So we get a three-parter, but then we're getting like a six-parter after this. So maybe they did have to kind of move some chess pieces in place and need to have like a fill-in issue here. Because we're gonna the next storylines in the next volume are Craven's first hunt, that's in the little post-it down here on this last page, and then New Ways to Die, which brings the Thunderbolts and Osborn and a lot of like the mayoral stuff into play, and that's a six-part story arc. So and back to like the artists, we don't get these same artists for a little while. I'm scanning
Mm.
ahead. So JRJR comes back to for the New Ways to Die storyline. I think, what do we have here? We have well, Phil Jimenez is on the very next storyline, and then we get some, Barry Kinson, and then I guess they do rotate, but they don't rotate as like we don't get who started all this off that I'm thinking of. Like McNiven doesn't come back for like at all, or for like a while. I don't think he comes back at all. So like some of these guys drop out and need to be swapped out for other people, I guess.
Yeah, I honestly just do not remember what comes after this, because I read these when they first came out. This is my first time reading them again. So
Fair enough. All right, ready to move on to the wrap up then?
yeah, how about some bonus material? Just real briefly on that. The extras we have in this book are, I believe, the same bonus material as in the Swing Shift one shot. I'm trying to find my copy now. I ended up moving my stuff all over the place here. Um, so we get the Spider-Man Manifesto by Tom Brevoort, which I mentioned previously. This outlines Brevoort's thoughts on Spider-Man and how the book should approach the character, and it outlines how the brain trust is going to work. And for the most part, I agree with what Brevoort is saying in this, but I don't think his vision was fully fleshed out or it worked as he intended it to. We then also get the 2008 Spider-Man Bible, which gives a brief breakdown of the various characters and their relations in the Brand New Day verse. And then we wrap up with some sketches and a letter by editor Steve Wacker about the director's cut. At least that's what was in the director's cut. Stoger, was there more in the actual book that
Some
I
variant
missed there?
covers that I flipped through while you were talking. I think that's the only thing that's additional here. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's all the
here,
Spider-Man Bible right there.
yeah, and then and that's the back cover. But there was yeah, these going back. So just like these variant covers. I think that's the only.
Okay. All right. Ready to finally put this one to bed?
Yeah.
All right. So for my rating here, got a little hint there on the screen. It is admittedly difficult for me to give this an unbiased opinion. On the surface, these are exactly what you would want from a good Spider Man story. In a sense, we're getting the back to basics with more grounded stories, the return of the mechanical web shooters, but then also the life problems that come with that. And I like all of that. But as I said earlier, it feels hollow. There's a clear separation from the Spider Man that came before and a clear feeling of reboot because that is exactly what happened. And on the one hand, that would be okay because we often get that sense when a new writer takes over. But the Brain Trust kept including these little hints and nudges about the terrible storyline that came before, which was clearly a slap in the face to longtime readers or those who were opposed to the means by which they dissolved Spider Man's marriage. Unfortunately, the volume is walking in the waft of stench left over by one more day, and it can't escape that. And I'm not sure there's much memorable about these stories, honestly. Aunt May working for Feast and Mr. Negative are probably the standouts, but those were handled better in other mediums. Like I mentioned before, the PlayStation Spider Man game. I think that was done better there. If you held a gun to my head a week from now, I'm probably not going to be able to tell you who Peter's new roommate is, Gonzalez, as we just mentioned, or who the head of the DB was. I had a moment of inspiration where I remembered his name, but I can't now. All right. It just doesn't stick. And I think that's because there's a lack of consistency when it comes to the brain trust. And the brain trust as a concept, and to have a group of artists cover certain story arcs is, as I said before, a great idea on paper. When we see it play out here, though, it feels disjointed, and the only real villain we see with any through line during all this is Menace, and even then, not so much. And the inconsistency in the art also makes for a jarring reading experience. Now, mind you, the art isn't bad at all. I like a lot of the art, a lot of it's great, but once you settle into one artist's style, it then changes after 3 issues. Taking a quick count, we know that we have 4 rotating writers who make up the Brain Trust, but we don't have a single penciler appear more than once, with the exception of Phil Jimenez, who did the Free Comic Book Day issue, which started it, and then his own run later. So that was 8 different pencilers for this one book. And honestly, I stopped keeping track of the inkers because it was getting to be too much. So, of course, the look of the book feels disjointed. And had this been a Bronze Age or earlier book, that many artist changes in such rapid succession would give us a sense that there's a real problem on the book. But obviously, this is different circumstances. You know, it's intentional to have so many different artists because of how often they're trying to get the book out. But it just feels so off, right? So anyway, for my rating, I am giving it a 7.0. It is better than I remember. There's still some flaws here that need to be worked through, but I admit it was better than I remembered it when I first read it. Stoder?
So I have a different perspective that I'm hitting this from. So I do, when I think about this volume in isolation of the overall Brand New Day story arc, um my initial thoughts here are that there's a lot of world building here, and we're trying to see what sticks. We're throwing a lot up at the wall, but there's some great concepts that come out of here. Beast and Aunt May she still works there today. That has lasted for 350 issues. That she still goes to Feast and still volunteers. It's made its way into video games. It's made its way as a sort of a through line as a major place in the Spider-Man mythos. Some of these things that don't last that long or don't forgettable are because they weren't picked up on again and weren't used again. And some of it is because they ran a natural course through the storyline and they're done. So, you would only think about them if you're thinking about this era. I'm thinking about Dexter Bennett. I don't want to spoil the sort of ending of what I'm alluding to there and what happens to that character and things like that, but something will happen eventually that will complete his story arc. And so there's a reason why we're not talking about him today, because that story arc has been completed and gone. I think that while I can understand the jarring art style differences, this is not an area. I was very used to 90s era where there was inconsistency with pencilers and you would constantly get fill-in issues, or you'd have this brand new penciler that would come on board. They'd last for a story arc or two, and then they'd kind of fade away and you wouldn't know what's going on. This is a very upfront storyline or story to the readers saying that we're going to have a consistent penciler for a particular story arc. And every time we change a story arc, we're potentially going to have a new penciler, and I'm okay with that. I like the fact that we're able to keep that artist around for that particular story. And I think that there are a lot of characters in here that do last and do have some staying power. Carly Cooper stays around until the end of Dan Slott's run, or at least until the end of the Superior Spider-Man era of her its run. So, another 700, or I'm sorry, another through 730 or something like that. Issue will be that's a that's a good chunk of time. People still talk about whoever Peter's girlfriend was in this early 80s, that the girl that like went crazy or something like that.
Oh yeah, Deb
Sh-
Whitman.
yeah, she's barely
Yeah.
around, like a blip in the quantity of storylines. Yes, granted, we have additional, you know there's a lot more comics that are coming out, because we're on more of a 3 times a month schedule. But
Yeah.
respect where respect's due, right? If you're a character that's stuck around for I didn't do the count, but 200 issues of Spider-Man out of 1,000. I mean, that's 20% of Spider-Man's time where you've been there in the background, or growing and changing and things like that. So I think that there's a lot here. But um from a volume by itself, and judging it of what it's trying to do, it is just the beginning and it is just world building. So there is not a lot of memorable stuff that is coming out of this, because we're trying to just get things going. So with that in mind, I have it as a 7.5, not because I'm knocking it down, but because I look at this as the beginning of a build up, of a ramp where there's better things to come.
All right.
The combined
Sounds good.
rating,
So
we're at a 7.25.
7.25. And I'll admit, Stoger, when I saw your rating come in for that as 7.5, I was a little surprised because you and we've already discussed that we have differences about this era and other modern eras of Spider-Man. So I was a little surprised you were going to come in that low. But I
There's
understand
just
your
not a
point.
lot of memorable things that are coming out of this for me to like justify it to be higher, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think that there's, other than that last issue, I don't think there's anything bad in here. I just know that there's a lot more better stuff. So there's like a little bit of a, I am almost grading on a scale because I know what's to come. So I'm versus like if we were just reading a random Hulk volume and I have no idea what's like, what's around it. Like I have to sort of judge it in isolation. This one's great, getting graded a little bit on the context of where it's at in Spider-Man mythos, and um where I know there's better things to come. So I gotta squeeze those things between this and a perfect 10, and none of it's going to be a perfect 10.
Yeah. All right. Well, normally at this point, we would tell you about upcoming episodes. I'll say right now that since this is a bonus episode to launch our Patreon. If you want to know our regular episodes, see YouTube. We've got a post that will have our regular schedule there. For the Patreon feed, though, what we're going to do next is we're going to look at Amazing Spider-Man Modern Era Epic Volume 1 Coming Home. Let's see, I think I pulled a copy of that over here. No, I didn't. I put that away already. Oops.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into
behind.
this one with you. It's going to be really interesting to see what our thoughts are.
Yeah, I have no idea what we would say. A hint in the behind the scenes, we've already recorded it. In fact, it is already available for you on Patreon. So if you do want to subscribe, you already have an episode up there already. So you'll get our thoughts on that one. And that will be the July-ish episode. For June. God, I'm going backwards. It's June, July, August. There we go. We're going to do the next Modern Era Amazing Spider-Man. This is Volume 2, The Life and Death of Spiders. Some nice J. Scott Campbell, all of his covers. Is this the Beefcake era where he has all of the Beefcake's maybe not the right word, but all the MJ covers that everyone wants to collect because she's scantily clad. Her and the Black Cat, right? Is that this one?
I think so. It's like issue like 601. Is that in this arc? We get
601
or 501. Sorry.
No, 501. Yeah, 501. Yeah, that's in this one. Yep.
Yeah, so that should be the cover that you're thinking of. Somewhere around there.
Yeah,
I think that's the cover for 500, and then they start doing the MJ covers after that.
So maybe it's actually in the next one that we're going to do after that, which is Sins Past. So that's going to be September. I don't know if I have a slide for that one. But that is the current thought at the moment. We're going to do the next couple of Modern Era Spider-Man Epic Collection volumes, and then we'll decide from there. We might continue with Spider-Man. We might move to some Avengers. We will just find out. But
you know what? Sorry to interrupt you, but I was right the first time. It is 601. It's 100 issues from there. It's not going to be in there at all.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, he does just that 601 cover, and then there's a 606 and 607 are the Black Cat ones. So if we continued with the Brand New Day era, it would actually be in Brand New Day volume or something. I don't know. So, but wherever that comes in.
Got it. Well, this is what happens when I have not read these things in 20 years. I just cannot remember. All right. But yeah, we thank you guys for watching this. Again, watch our regular episodes, subscribe on YouTube, and if you really want to support us, help us out so we can do some more cool things, join the Patreon. Just $5. You'll get exclusive episodes like this one, and anything else we put out, we'll put up early there. Stozier, any other final thoughts?
No, it's great to go through this with you, and I can't wait to keep defending Dan Slott throughout the whole Brand New Day era whenever we get to the next volume.
Yeah. Or, if we get through these first 3 volumes of the Modern Era epics, there's always, 13 and 14 that are out? Mm-hmm. As we're recording this the day before the 2027 reveals are going to be made, so we don't know what those are yet.
Yeah, so Big Time is out, and the Spider Island should be out by the
Spider Island.
Yeah, I think it's in September or something like that.
Sometime soon. All right. Well, that's all I have. Thank you very much. We'll catch you all next time.
See you guys.